This is Jocko podcast number 454 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
All day, murderous bursts of machine gun fire hammered our position, shattering windows and impacting interior walls, each round with the violence and kinetic energy of a sledgehammer wielded at full force. Some of the incoming rounds were armor-piercing and punched through the thick concrete of the low wall surrounding the rooftop. All our element of SEALs, EOD bomb technicians, and Iraqi soldiers could do under such accurate enemy fire was hit the deck and try not to get our heads shot off. Rounds snapped inches above us, and shards of glass and concrete fragments rained down everywhere. Despite the onslaught, we held our position in the large 4-story apartment building. When the fury of the attack subsided, our SEAL snipers returned fire with devastating effect. The onslaught of heavy enemy fire continued frequently throughout the day, with periods of intense violence and periods of calm. As the day faded and the sun dipped below the horizon, the attacks diminished. Gunfire and explosions subsided. With the darkness, an eerie quiet descended upon Ramadi, broken only by the evening call to prayer that echoed across the dusty rooftops. Our SEAL platoon and Iraqi soldiers packed our gear and prepared to depart. Remembering the vulnerability of the single exit door to the street, our two EOD bomb technicians went to work. Peering over the second-story balcony through their night vision goggles, they scanned the area around the exit door and the surrounding street, littered with trash and potholes, in some places scarred by the craters of previous I.E.D. blasts. But something was out of place. Something looked different than when they had scanned the area in the early morning darkness before dawn. An otherwise unobtrusive item lay against the building wall, only feet from the exit door, covered with a plastic tarp. Just a tiny sliver of a smooth, cylindrical object peeked out from under the edge of the tarp. Something looked suspicious, an EOD operator relayed. It was most unwelcome news, as the stairway to the street was our only easy means of departure. Our EOD operators carefully went to work. Through meticulous investigation, they uncovered 2 130-millimeter rocket projectiles whose nose cones were packed with Simtex, a plastic explosive. Had they not discovered the device, and had we triggered it, the massive explosion and deadly shrapnel could have wiped out half of our platoon. We couldn't leave this I.E.D. here to kill other U.S. soldiers, Marines, or innocent Iraqi civilians. So EOD carefully sent their own explosive charge on it to set it off or blow it in place where it lay. And that right there is an excerpt from the book called Extreme Ownership, which was written by myself and my brother, Leif Babin. And that section was actually written by Leif, and you hear the mention of EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technicians. And these men were an integral part of the platoon and an integral part of Task Unit Bruiser. And in that particular case, as you heard, the EOD techs identified a grave threat of an I.E.D. placed just outside an overwatch position, a tactic that had just been used against some of our brothers from the 3-8 Marines a few days earlier. So one of our EOD techs volunteered to go and place a charge on that I.E.D. and blow it up. And what that means is that EOD tech going external, exposing himself to enemy attackers who are usually overwatching those I.E.Ds, exposing himself to that I.E.D., exposing himself to secondary and tertiary I.E.Ds that could be there, and maybe that obvious one was just a decoy. So it's a huge risk to go out and blow that thing in place. But the alternative was to leave the I.E.D. there and perhaps let someone else deal with it, or perhaps let someone else get killed by it. So in order to protect Charlie Platoon and in order to protect all the soldiers and Marines who might be wounded or killed by that IED. Our EOD tech went out there and disarmed it himself. And that is one story of countless similar stories where our EOD technicians saved the lives of the SEALs from Task Unit Bruiser and also saved the lives of countless soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from the Ready First Brigade. And it's an honor to have that EOD technician, my brother from Task Unit Bruiser, Nick Kush, here with us tonight to share his experiences and lessons learned. Nick, thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jocko. Good to see you, Echo.
Yeah, I never really wanted that job of EOD, and I'm sure we'll get into why you wanted it at some point.
Yeah.
Super sketchy and a ton of risk, but that's where you ended up. And before we get to how you ended up there, let's just talk about growing up. Where'd you come from?
Southern California. So,
where in Southern California?
So grew up, was born in Pomona, and then grew up for, I don't know, what was living in Laverne, so just outside in LA County. Until I was about 8, 9 years old. Grandpa was getting sick, and we ended up moving up into the high desert for a few years, midway of high school. Then my parents divorced midway through high school, ended up moving back down to Orange County where my dad was at, and then rode out the rest of high school.
Like, what years were you down there for high school?
So, I mean, I graduated in 95, so it was like, 92, 93 time frame.
So it was like your sophomore, junior, senior year or something like that?
Freshman, sophomore year, yeah. Yeah, so then that's like... discovered surfing, so barely made it through high school because of surfing. Yeah.
So that's when you started surfing, is when you moved back down?
Well, when I was a kid, when we go do some beach stuff, but nobody was teaching me surfing, or it was just a wild man in the water at 5 years old. So, and then when I got back closer to the coast, then it just consumed me. So
you're surfing 7 days a week?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Yeah, before first period, and then on the weekends.
Were you on the surf team?
No, I was a degenerate.
Did they have surf team?
Not at our school, but at you're talking I was about 25 minutes away from the beach. You're talking like Newport, Huntington. Those guys had surf teams. Yeah. Not my high school.
When I tell people about surf team in California, then the Scholastic Surf Association.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. People from the rest of the country are like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah,
very serious.
Yeah, it was really big. It started. I remember it was called the NSSA. Was a big. Yeah.
And when kids are part of the surf team, they go surfing before school and they get to skip first period.
Yeah.
And
so it's part of first period.
Yeah. You get like a 2-hour sesh.
Yeah. And a pretty good spot.
Which is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
So when you were going surfing, you weren't doing it as part of the organized school scenario?
No.
How did you get down to the beach?
Well, we would drive. It's like we go, well, once I turned 16, then it was easy. But like other guys that were older than me, then it's like, we're all going surfing. Sweet. Who's driving? And then, then once I got my own car, I barely made it through high school because of it. So.
Did you skate too or no?
No, it was mostly surfing. Yeah.
If you can, it seems like skating is if you don't have the opportunity to surf.
Right.
No offense to skaters. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But if you can surf.
Yeah.
It was kind of the. Yeah. What did your dad do?
So my dad, I'd say he was in finance, but he didn't go to school long, but he's really good with numbers, and he worked as a financial controller for car dealerships in Southern California for years. I mean, it was like he always worked at Toyota, Nissan, and he was just a big financial controller. Still, I remember when I was a kid, he would do weird stuff on sheets. He would just have numbers, and I thought it was just I didn't think anything of it, but looking back on it, it's like, man, that's some weird Goodwill Hunting stuff he's doing there. I don't know, but because there was no rhyme or reason, there was no plus signs, or there was no it was like, so it was just really strange. But he was really good with numbers. He still is. He'll be 79 this year, and I mean, he's wicked smart.
And you had brothers, 2 brothers?
Yeah, I have an older brother and a younger brother. We're all 8 years apart, and as you can assume, I'm the middle child.
Wait, you're all 8 years apart?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
So wait, that's 16 years worth of kids, I guess?
Yeah.
16? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Were you close to them, or is it too distant?
We're close now.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's like my older brother would babysit me, and so I'd be, more of a annoying for him than anything else. It wasn't cool. So, but it was fun. It was neat though, because when my older brother was 16, and my younger brother was born, there was actually they were actually pretty close when he was a baby. And he had the maturity to kind of to really big brother him. In that sense. And then, we all kind of drifted apart, but then we've over the past couple of years, we've been, I think closest as we've ever been. So it's really cool.
Did you, so you're going to high school, you're basically just trying to surf as much as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Did you have any kind of plan for life?
No, no. I mean, I started I would join the golf team. I was like, this is what everybody's doing. Why not? So I could surf and then we'd play golf for free. So and it was funny because I grew up in Orange County, and Tiger Woods also grew up in Orange County, and I think he played for Whittier or Cypress, so one of the high schools that played our high school. So I was on the JV team. We're all like burnouts, we suck. But then there's the varsity team, and then Tiger comes, and he had just won some amateur event, and he's on the driving range, and our school's playing his school. And us JV guys are like, whatever, this guy, and they smashed us, so, it was pretty funny. But,
so as you're getting into your senior year, do you know what you're going to do when you graduate high school?
No, my brother was going to school at UCSD, down here in San Diego. And I was kind of optimistic that I would come down here and that, and sort of just work and, live with him, but that didn't end up working out because he was then getting ready to transfer to the East Coast. And then, I tried the junior college route for a little bit, a couple months, but surfing got in the way of that. And then started waiting tables and working I was working at Angel Stadium. I was actually selling souvenirs at the original California Angel Stadium. Yeah. So.
And how long did you do that before you noticed that there might be a military path?
When they called me in April of 1996, and it was like, hey, we understand that you recently graduated high school. Because I had talked to a Marine recruiter, with a buddy, because you go in with buddies, you're like, yeah, let's do this. And then he went and I didn't. But, And then in April, it was, a Navy recruiter called, and I thought, oh, fuck.
Dude, so he had like a freaking contact list or something?
I guess, yeah. Like, it visited the high school. Mm-hmm. I was coming up on a year that I'd already graduated, and I was just working at, a restaurant. I was working at Islands Restaurant in Brea, California, waiting tables. And he called, and that's when I thought, well, I need a job, and the Navy's around water, so I could keep surfing. So this works. I'll have some conversations, and then before I knew it, I was in MEPS down here in San Diego about a month later.
What kind of job did he offer you?
So the way it went back then, and I'm not sure if it still goes that way now. I took a practice ASVAB in the recruiting office, and then went down and took the ASVAB, and then the next day you come back, and they had a list of 5 or 6 schools, and I had a couple that I had identified just based on some limited research, but those weren't offered. It was there was 5 or 6 different schools, and all of them were the A school. The trade school was located in Great Lakes, Illinois, except one. It was at Virginia Beach, and all I saw was beach. That one. I'm not going to go to Great Lakes even for 2 months. And I was like, I'm going to go to the beach, and so that's how I picked Operations Specialist A school in Virginia Beach.
I was heavily influenced because I surfed as a kid growing up in Maine, and I also skated because there wasn't always waves.
Yeah.
But when I was trying to figure out what branch of special operations I wanted to go into as a young surfing kid, I saw the SEAL teams were either stationed in Virginia Beach, Virginia, or San Diego, California. Yep. Done and done.
Yeah, that was it.
And of course, the water side appealed to me, and I wanted to be like a waterborne commando because I surfed. But that played a huge role, and it's true too.
Yeah,
it's either that. I guess the Coast Guard, you're kind of guaranteed to get stationed on the ocean. I bet the Coast Guard has the most ocean. Am I wrong?
They probably do, but the Coast Guard, later on in my career, I worked with some Coast Guard guys that were actually stationed in southern Costa Rica, and were surfing they had the best kept secret, surfing in Golfito. It was right on the border between Panama and Costa Rica.
You're putting this word on.
They told me this 22 years ago. So secret's out, man. But that was I never even considered that, and I didn't know much about special operations. I had 2 uncles that were in the Army. My grandfather was in the Army. He flew he flew during the war. He had a significant plane crash in 1943. I'm just getting a little bit more schooled up on that as I get older. So that was kind of like my military influence. And my influence, as a kid growing up, were these uncles, kind of looking out after me and, beating the shit out of me. And, and so it was a cool, that portion of the childhood was great. And that was really cool.
So you end up, what'd you say, OS? School?
OS, A School Operations Specialist. And I looked at it, I was like, well, if you flip it, it's special operations. So that's kind of like, it'll morph into something, so.
Did you surf when you were in Virginia Beach?
Yeah. Try. I was there in the winter of 90. I went to boot camp in late 96. So I was in Virginia Beach the winter of like 96, 97.
So you get done with A School. Where do you go?
So they selected me out of A School based on my academic performance, and which is odd because I was not an academic high performer in high school, but because of my academic performance, they selected me to go up to the Bureau of Naval Personnel when it used to be in DC. So I went to Bupers to work under the OS detailers as basically like an admin dude, an admin kid. So I went up there and ended up there for 9 months. I was selected to go to a pre-commissioned destroyer based out of San Diego, out of 32nd Street. But while I was there, right down the hall was PERS 401 Delta, which is where diver, SWCC, EOD, SEAL detailers are. And so they had some scruffs there, some guys that were out of A School, got stationed there before they went to their respective school. We're all the same age. We're all, trying to find our way. So I ended up making friends with them. And then I put a SWCC package in. And then the detailers that I worked for were a little pissed because they wanted me to be an OS, in the fleet. But I put a SWCC package in and then went to SWCC school. After that.
Do you know when SWCC school started?
Well, so the class I was in, we classed up. I went to SEER school in January of 98. And then right after that, I went to it used to be PTR&R because they would pull us together. And then I think my class started in February of 98, and it was SWCC class 2-4. So the original history, the good portion of significant history for the brown water black berets was in Vietnam, but it even goes back further to World War II. Is where they kind of carry their homage, and they pay homage to those guys that kind of were driving the boats and inserting elements and things like that. So you could do kind of the rewind for what year they started. The center started SWCC class, but we were SWCC class 24, and I think last year we had our SWCC class 124 graduate. I think that's what it was. So special warfare combatant crewmen. So
correct. when I got in the teams, it wasn't a rating, and guys would basically go. You could be a normal dude in the fleet, and then you just get stationed at a special boat team for 2 years or 4 years. Some guys, of course, would figure out a way to stay there for longer. But it wasn't an official kind of thing.
Yeah, it wasn't a Navy enlisted code, an NEC code yet.
It was just like you just get stationed there. And so we kind of would have random dudes when we'd go on deployment. They'd do the workup and stuff, but it wasn't their life. It wasn't their job.
Right.
And so it wasn't until the Navy figured out, which is a really smart thing to figure out, you want to have people that know how to drive your boats, driving your boats.
Yeah. Well, and then the camaraderie that they would have to form with their respective SEAL platoons and, assets that they were working with to be able to kind of basically be a little bit closer to speaking commando than just not.
Yeah. And you could get lucky and you could get unlucky. We went to do a VBSS one time over in the Gulf, and we didn't have any special boat unit with us. And so we're going to use the ship's ribs. And we did. We used the ship's ribs. But we'll literally ask the guys, hey, does anyone here know how to drive a boat good? And there was a freaking 19-year-old kid from Florida that grew up. And, he's like, hey, I grew up in the Key, or it wasn't the Keys, but it was whatever. I grew up in such and such. I've been driving a boat every day of my life, and I'm called on the ribs. And the kid was freaking awesome. He pulled alongside, it's hard to drive that boat.
Yeah.
And he just did it freaking awesome. And I hope he went to, I told him 10 times, bro, what you need to be doing, because he was just a normal fleet dude, a year and a half in, and he was pumped.
Yeah.
But that's a job that you need to learn how to do. And going back to the early 90s, you'd have some boat drivers that they just weren't that good. They hadn't been doing it for very long, and so they kind of suck. So it was good that they eventually professionalized it and made it into a job that you can stay in your whole career and be a damn boat driver.
Yeah.
So that's what you end up doing. How was the SWCC school? How long was it?
I think at the time it was, I think it was only 10 weeks. I'm not sure how long it is now, but I think it was 10 or I don't know, it was 12 weeks. It's 12 weeks long. And we had, I think we had about like 36 guys in our class, somewhere around there in the mid 30s. And, surprisingly enough, like we lost guys. It was a lot of the stuff was water stuff, was being in the water, because like we still did, a lot of stuff in the combat training tank and yeah,
Yeah, if you're going to be driving around little boats all the time, all over the ocean, it's probably pretty smart to be good in the ocean, good in the water.
Yeah.
Do you get a job like, hey, you're going to be a driver, you're going to be a gunner, you're going to be a comms guy? Do they do that?
They do, typically, not when you graduate. It was, at the time it was like you're either going West Coast, East Coast, or you're going to Mississippi. It's either coastal, or riverine. And so they will, just like the military does, they'll send you where they need you. And so I ended up staying on the West Coast, which is great. And it was, you either had, they had 2 or 3 different types of boats that you're going to be assigned to. But typically a new guy is going to be a navigator. You're going to learn the radar systems, but at the same time, you also have to do all the grunt work on the boat and help the engineer and understand the engines, and because it's doing all that stuff because we didn't have a mechanic team. We were the mechanics, which is was really cool. 21, 20 years old to be learning, how to change an oil on a turbo diesel, jet boat. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing. And so to learn, when you go to basically put the boat in, do whatever training or the op or whatever, and then pull the boat out, you're there for another 2 hours doing post-ops on the boats, even putting them away, rinsing, cleaning, doing all the post-op checklists and everything like that. So you basically learn to be a navigator, kind of progress to become, an engineer, and then eventually a coxswain, boat driver, and then it was like LPO, and then our OIC was, at the time we didn't have officers. It was SEAL officers that would come over as far as command level, but we would have fleet officers that would be like an OIC of a boat detachment.
Oh, okay.
But then our platoon, our det chief or detachment chief, has been around for a minute. And we used to have guys, when SBU 26, when Panama was open, we had a lot of riverine guys come from there, came up, and so that's where we had some of the mentorship there.
So I imagine you're pretty freaking stoked, because you were sitting in an office in D.C. and now you're just out in San Diego, freaking gunning it on a rib. Were you on a rib, basically?
Yeah. It was on the 11 meter. So I started off on a 30 footer and then went to the 11 meter. Yeah.
So you're stoked.
Yeah, it was great. And then it got on the first detachment and cycled through to PACOM or Guam, first deployment with SEAL Team 5. So that was April to October of '99.
Is that where you met? Because you knew Tony when you showed up, right?
That was where I first met Tony. Yeah. So when that story comes around, it's hilarious. Yeah.
So what was your first deployment? Did you doing exercises?
Yeah. Well, it was the pre-war. Not much had been going on. It was like, so you get over to Guam. If you've ever been to Guam, especially in the 90s when there was nothing really going on, but it was just sort of, you were that contingent force for the region. And so, a lot of training. We'd go up north of Saipan and do shooting up at the island called FDM. So that was where we would do shoots and train OTBs, over the beach stuff, inserts, and just get proficient and marry up with the platoon and build rapport and just do training stuff. And then we did some stuff in Singapore. We did an exercise in Singapore. There was a big exercise, with Korea and Japan and, in the PACOM region during that time. And
Did you surf?
Oh yeah.
I was going to say, because when you said, it's basically the 90s and what we did was surf.
Oh yeah.
Because you're in Guam.
Oh yeah.
And there's freaking great waves.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually met a Coast Guard guy there surfing. I'm still friends with him today. I mean, it's 25 years ago, we out there in the water surfing. So he was stationed out there, Coast Guard. Surfers. Yeah. No, that's a legitimate thing. Yeah.
So you go on that deployment, you meet Tony. How well did you hang out with him at all?
Oh, I mean, there was you could rewind the clocks. I mean, there were some legends on that platoon. They were all younger guys, but so, I mean, it was like met Tony and then, it was like did some stuff and then, but that was about it. And then came back and then, kind of wash, rinse, repeat, and then got into another detachment and then deployed.
What was the next one?
That was June of 2000, and that was to Bahrain. So we were basically going over there with Team 3. and we were doing the mission set was a response to go up to Kuwait and then do VBSS on tankers leaving Iraq.
Yeah. I was talking about how, before we hit record, about how you and I missed each other on a bunch of time frames.
Yeah.
But so, for instance, I left the West Coast in 1998 to go to the East Coast. In 2000, I was in Bahrain. I was on the JFK, but I was with the platoon. But we were there for the millennium. So like from whatever, the fall of 99 until the spring of 2000.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So you relieved me there, probably with Team 3 guys that showed up after.
Yeah.
So again, just missed each other. So were you guys doing VBSS?
Yeah, a lot. We had a lot of live ones. Yeah, a lot of real ones. Yeah. I mean, those are a haul, man, because we would fly the ribs up. And then, if you remember PCs,
patrol craft,
patrol coastal, whatever
Hurricane.
it was. Yeah,
they all had storm names: Hurricane, Cyclone.
Yeah.
Come on now.
It's awesome. And then we
were you doing them off the PCs?
No, so we would. They
remember
tried
the PCs. They made these. So they made these boats, Echo Charles, and they're like, "This is going to be what SEALs can operate on."
Yeah,
you know, they held like They were a ship. They were like a small, tiny ship, but a ship. You see what I'm saying? The difference between like a boat and a ship. You know what a Navy ship looks like? Well, these were like tiny. They look like tiny ships.
I think they were staffed with like 35 or 40 guys. It wasn't that big.
And there was room for 8 SEAls on them. Like they had like the racks or whatever for 8 SEALs.
But dudes stopped it because they kept getting sick.
Oh, damn. Freaking gnarly.
Yeah.
So you guys were doing some, at this point, were you a driver yet?
Let's see. Yeah, I was. Okay. Yeah, so I was. Yeah, and so I was driving, and so we were doing ship takedowns, and I mean, they were real ship takedowns. You know, like the ships would be laden down to where you wouldn't need a ladder. It was very rare that there was ever a hook and ladder. It was usually like the little Jacob's ladder, or you just step across because those things were all the way down.
Yeah, we did a bunch of those too on that same deployment that I was just talking about, and we made a little almost like a water ski ladder. We welded it up, and it was just like hook on the side. And it was 4 rungs or something like that.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a Jacob's ladder off of a helo, and it's you just like a pool ladder.
So that's a pretty good time.
Yeah, and then so in October of 2000, we were in Kuwait when the USS Cole was hit.
Oh.
And so that was like, the amphibious readiness group, Alpha. So we would have, there would be a SEAL platoon and then a boat detachment that was assigned to a ship, basically readiness group. And so those guys had initially responded to it in Yemen. And when those guys, when they got the Cole out and the Cole was finally moving, they sent us down with our respective guys with our platoon. And we were in UAE for about 6 weeks, and we were doing ship security because none of the ships of any of the readiness groups were pulling in to refuel or resupply. So when they would come into Jabal Ali, and so we were just doing ship security for 6 weeks, living in Dubai.
Do you get to lock and load your weapon?
Yeah. I was. I was actually fit. We were escorting a ship out, and there was another boat coming. I was like, first time I almost unloaded a 50 cal on a boat. I mean, I don't think I never have, but I was like, we're about to shoot this guy. Mm-hmm. But you've ever seen 50 cal rounds, when they hit the water, they go everywhere. So it was, and the beach is like that way. And it's like, oh man, like this guy better stop because this is going to be bad. But it ended up being fine. He ended up stopping. But it was like, that's what we were doing, was ship security because of what happened, how successful that the execution of hitting the USS Cole was.
Yeah, they still use that kind of as the story, I think, up in Navy boot camp.
They should. Yeah.
The example. Huge. And they run that whole, when I went through boot camp, we didn't have anything like this big simulator that is like a fake ship being flooded and all that stuff. That's what they do now. Yeah. But I think a lot of it's based on the Cole.
Yeah. I mean, that was really unexpected. And the lives that got lost, and the guys were just on the other side of the bulkhead and no idea what happened.
Freaking sketch.
Yeah.
So then we come home from that deployment.
Mm-hmm. I was in the training cell for a couple months, and then there was an opportunity to go down to the boat detachment that was basically like permanently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Unit 4 in Puerto Rico when Roosevelt Roads was still open. And so I was like, that seems like a pretty cool opportunity. And so went down to Puerto Rico, was down there for just shy of 3 years. So March of 2001. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sitting on the quarterdeck on September 11th, 2001, and then we see it in the news. There's news feed on the quarterdeck.
Were you stand and watch or something?
No. Like we were prepping because we were supposed to go to South America for a foreign internal defense block with some guys down in South America. Because that's kind of what we were doing. We would have the East Coast teams. They would deploy down basically as part of a Central and South America response. And so same kind of thing as Guam, no war going on. This is pre 9/11, and that's what we were doing. And so
we were Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah, we got that place dialed. Yeah. And then so we were getting ready to go to South America for a FID mission and on the 12th, and then that happened. And so we can't, they SOC South, they canceled the trip.
So everything gets locked down.
Yeah, everything changed.
And then at what point do you transition over to EOD? And how'd you hear about EOD?
So I had first heard about EOD when I was in boot camp. And then when I was at in DC, the detailer, the Master Chief detailer, EOD detailer, you got to learn a little bit more. I mean, like the SEAL detailer, kind of funny, I remember these names. The SEAL detailer was Master Chief Philpott. Mm-hmm. The EOD detailer was Master Chief Torres, and then the boat guy detailer was Master Chief, Senior Chief Sam Brown. And it was just those are the guys that you as an E1. This is my first look, at this world. And so I had thrown around leaving the boat community, man, because it's like I was young and I was already getting my ass kicked. Because you've been on those boats, man. These sea states, and then if you don't time it right, it's brutal, man. Even if you're not a boat driver, you're not jumping up and down to be on these boats for a long period of time. They're brutal, especially you're doing 100, 200 nautical mile transits. So I'm watching the war kick off in March of 2003 into Iraq. And the base had just gotten bracked. And so they were closing Roosevelt roads. And so it's like, do you go to the East Coast as a boat guy, or do I go back to the West Coast as a boat guy? And I was like, I'm going to miss this whole thing, and I was, and boat guys definitely had their pivotal part in Iraq later on. But then I just called the SWCC detailer. At the time, his name was Mike Worrellman. And I told him, I said, look, this is what I'm looking at doing. And he was awesome about it. He said, look, you've done your minimum activity tour. He's like, absolutely. If you want to go EOD, 100%, like I'll totally support it and endorse it. If it doesn't work out, you're more than welcome to come back. He's like, we'll set that up. So it's like, I wasn't looking for an insurance thing, but that was nice. Because, EOD school is a good 12 months. And then they had stopped. They didn't want any more E6s. And I was an E6 at the time. Mm-hmm. So we shut down the Unit 4 that fall of 2003, and then I transferred out to dive school in January of 2004.
Did you know any EOD guys prior to?
So on the base there or on our compound at Unit 4, there was a shore detachment, an EOD shore detachment. And so EOD's got shore detachments that will do like base response, ordnance response. So Vieques was a live shooting range, and so they would respond to unexploded ordnance or anything like that. So that they were like basically permanently stationed there for a 3-year ride. And so I was assigned to them as a prospective student in training, like a scruff for about 3 months. Mm-hmm. And so those were the first introduction I got really to EOD guys there.
Did you bro, when I was a kid and I saw machine guns, I was like, hell yeah, that's kind of what I want. That's kind of what I want to be doing. Did you look at like a guy in a bomb suit? No. And a pair of pliers walking up to a freaking bomb and be like, hell yeah.
No, it was funny because there was this an East Coast, I think he was a Team 8 senior chief that had come down with this platoon. And when I was throwing around basically leaving SWCC, I'd asked him, I'd kind of, I go to these older guys and look for some mentorship. So there was no bias. And I said, I was throwing around the idea of either going to EOD school or going to BUDS. And I was just looking for some snapshot. You've been around, you've been.
How old were you at this point?
So that would have been 2003. So I guess 24-ish, 24. Yeah. So
you made E6 pretty freaking quick.
I know.
Dude.
I got 5.5 years. I got capped to E6.
Oh, you got capped to check.
Yeah. So I was serving a role as an LPO.
By the way, I got capped to E5. Yeah. So it's all good.
What is capped?
Command Advancement Program. You didn't actually. Basically, you're doing a really good job, and if you're doing a really good job, but you haven't been promoted, then the commanding officer can just promote you. It happens to one person. So it's like he was obviously kicking ass because to get capped is they take one person from the whole command. So it's a very, I don't say like it's an honor, but it's definitely recognition that you've been doing really good.
Yeah.
Because everyone else has to like take tests and get promoted, but you're just getting, especially if you're kind of junior like that.
Yeah. But I was filling the role, and I don't, it wasn't like I was going to meetings and I needed to be an E6 or anything like that, but I was filling the role. And then it takes a lot of recommendations and a lot of, 05 signatures to go off on a command advancement. So
no, that's definitely a clear sign of doing.
Yeah.
What's that term we used to say? Sustained superior performance in the field of excellence, for sure.
So it's kind of like skipping a grade in elementary school, something like this.
A little bit.
It's a little bit more significant, but it's one where that works.
Okay. So it sounds different, or it is different than what it sounds. Like capped sounds like you're limited.
No.
It's
a command advancement program. Command advancement program.
Yeah. We add the extra capped. It's actually you're capped. Selected for cap.
Yeah. It becomes a verb.
Right. Yeah. Like DOR, right?
Yeah.
He DOR'd.
Yeah. So he got capped.
I got
capped.
All day.
Yeah.
I got capped to E5. I didn't get capped to E6, but the big joke was I got capped to ensign because I hadn't been to college. Yeah. And I did the Seaman and Admiral program, and the Seaman and Admiral program, the one that I went through, you just became an officer.
Yeah.
I mean, you went to OCS, but with no college, it's kind of it's pretty cool. So, my friends would be like, dude, you got capped to ensign, which would, kind of realistic. Got capped to E5.
Quick question, just to clarify. When you say E5, E6, E is for enlisted, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And O is for officer. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I thought. But then when you're saying ensign and all this, I'm like, I don't know.
Dude, you're going to do good on the test later.
We're over here.
He's in the game.
Cool.
So what did the SEAL tell you? The senior chief from Team 8 or Team 10?
He was really, it was cool because he was really supportive. He said, he goes, look, he's like, with where we're at, this day and age, it's like, he said the attrition rate is obviously really high, on both. He's like, you're looking at academically or physically. He said, the way I look at it, he goes, obviously I'm glad with the decision that I made and the path that, that he took, or whatever year, whatever Bud's class he was in. And he said, it's just one of those things where when you go and you do the long haul and you go and retire, he goes, the way EOD is going now, the history, the lineage of it is obviously morphed into what's going on with the war, but there's so much marrying up with the EOD guys and the SEAL platoons. You're going to do everything that we are doing. He goes, at the end of your career, you're just not going to have a trident on your label. And he goes, if that's not like what's driving you, he goes, I would recommend that. He goes, because what I'm seeing is that their jack of all trades is a lot more versed than what I'm seeing with us. He goes, but that's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't make a decision based on that. I just kind of sat with it and went through it. And I thought that it afforded me the opportunity to do a whole bunch of different things and to really just make my resume as diverse as humanly possible, because I knew I was already in it for 20, for at least, and I just wanted to be marketable when I was done. And it didn't matter if I had a trident or or whatever pin or whatever NEC or whatever I had. I just wanted to be really marketable, and that was how I looked at it. So, but my motivating factor for leaving SWCC is I just wanted to be on the ground in the war. Because like, unlike you, like when I was a kid, I grew up on Rambo and Predator and, this commando movies, right? But it wasn't the inspiration. My goals were short. I was like, where can I find 6 to 8 foot on a crowded surf? So that was my driving force. And so that when I'm watching, the Iraq invasion, just like everybody else in March of 2003, or not like everybody else, but like most people that are not a part of the invasion, the initial invasion, it's like, I can't just sit here, man. So, yeah. Was
it hard to get the package? Oh, no, you already said. They supported you.
Yeah.
And EOD was open for people.
Yeah.
There's not that many freaking EOD people, is there?
No, the number ratios, was really, at the time, was really low. And historically, they had only ever allowed E6s. Like you had to do a minimum of activity in the fleet. They wanted regular Navy people with Navy experience, Navy knowledge, then to come in. So when I got to dive school and went through dive school and then EOD school, they had started to change it. They're like, you E6s have only got one shot at this. We want E5s, E4s coming through now. Because they knew, to their credit, they knew that this was going to be a sustained thing in the Middle East and the I.E.D. threat is going to be real. And so, we wanted younger guys instead of the older guys that were not going to be able to physically withstand it. So,
is there like a screening, like a first set phase type thing where they're really testing your physical?
That was like 10 weeks of dive school. I mean, we lost quite a few people in dive school.
So is it the same dive school that the regular Navy goes through? Is it dive school?
Yeah. So there's you have your open water, your scuba. Mm-hmm. So that's what we would do first. And so you've got in Navy diver, you have your 2 Charlies, and then your one Charlies. Those are you learn scuba all the same, but then it morphs into, for those guys, it's going to be hard hat diving. Mm-hmm. We didn't do hard hat diving. So we would do scuba, and then we went to semi-closed circuit, the Mark 16. Mm-hmm. And this is the system at the time. I'm not sure if they're even still using that system, but the Mark 16 is a deep water, low magnetic, signature diving system.
And of course, you're comfortable in the water, so this is kind of no factor for you.
Yeah, it was mostly, there was awesome pool workouts, but the pool hits, I mean, very similar to, there's a lot of similarities between where they derive things from second phase and there, so similarities, I'll leave it at that. So
Andy Stumpf was a second phase instructor for 3 years. Yeah. He passed 4 people.
Yeah, I believe that.
In pool comp.
He'd probably still go back today and probably I shouldn't have passed those 4 people.
no, actually, what he told me, he goes, those 4 people fucking earned it.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what he sounds like. I bet they did.
That's cool.
Dude, he has some really good stories about pool comp. I need to do an entire podcast with him about just freaking pool comp, the reactions that people had. He started to be able to read people, what they were doing with their hands. It was this person's about to bolt the surface in 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, they bolt. He just got to reading them.
Oh, yeah.
I can imagine he was not very fun to have as a pool comp instructor. So that first 10 weeks is sort of where the weeding out process, that's the word I was looking for. It's like a weeding out process.
Yeah. I mean, other than the screener test, and all that stuff, I mean, but they had to get numbers, but yeah, that phased out a handful of guys for sure.
And then it becomes actual EOD school.
Yeah. So it was, I think it was about 9 or 10 months. Yeah, 10 months of EOD school. And while we still did, physical, PTs and things like that, but it was academic, and the scrutiny on academics were brutal, And here, keep in mind, here's this guy that barely made it through high school. Uh-huh. I'm like, what did I get myself into?
So you just knuckled down and
and you had and a lot of it was sensitive material, so you can't study at home. Oh, so you'd have the school day or the class day or whatever, and then you'd have study hall. So you have 3 hours of study hall afterwards.
And it's 10 months of that.
Yeah.
Dang, why is it in the SEAL teams you get a half a day of demo training and you're good?
Yeah. We'll get to some of those stories later, I'm sure, as to why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you get rolled back or anything in that?
Some guys that I didn't.
You didn't get rolled back.
So you got if you take a test, you get one chance to do a retest, and then you're out. And then they assess how far along you were, how close you were, and then they would just roll you into another class.
Was any of it practical tests?
Yeah, it would be
diffuse this thing.
Yeah, well, it would be if you're in tools and methods, and it was how to remove a fuse off of a Mark 82 bomb, a mechanical fuse, and it's how you do it remotely. So you're it's a lot of rigging. So you're doing pulleys and stakes and ropes and tape and all this just off the wall shit on how to unscrew remotely. A few things like that. Or how to basically take an explosive tool and then render it safe, So
yeah, and then did you have to learn basically every type of ordnance that we have in the military?
Yeah, well, so you would test on it. So you would show up to a test site and it would be oh, this landmine. Okay, you draw pictures of it or whatever, take notes of it, and then go back and then research it into the database that of all U.S. and foreign ordnance, basically, that known U.S. foreign ordnance at the time is in this database, and then it shows you render safe procedures, blow in place procedures, whatever you can do based on where it's sitting,
But you didn't have to memorize that?
No, but you started getting looks at things. You're oh, I know what I'm going to do here, So, but it's in phases. You would have ground stuff, which would be landmines and projectiles, and then you go to air stuff where you're going to have missiles and shit like that.
Did they give you straight up pool comp for ordnance where you had to walk up and look at something? There's wires everywhere, and it's a movie where they're all right, and the clock is ticking down. Please tell me that you did this, because otherwise I'm going to be so disappointed in our EOD community.
Not an EOD school, because
we did that shit at TradeNet, bro.
No, I know.
We'd have bombs ticking down. Yeah. You set that stuff up.
I did. Yeah, I did. Because I wanted it that way. In EOD school, it's literally literally basic fundamentals. It's basically to show that like I can present something, that you can be presented with something, you can not freak out, and you can basically take notes, observe, and then basically take action. And so that was just the very basic fundamentals. Once you get to the EOD commands, the mobile units, then that's where like any advanced schools or advanced training going through your basically your unit level training, and then going from there. But you got to take a lot of that from the older guys, the mentorship. It's like, okay, you get guys that spent time in Bosnia, that was like landmine, landmine time. And so those guys were all trained up on that. So we would get buffed up on that. But I mean, I got to the EOD command in February of 2005, and I.E.Ds were just really starting to pop off. And there you've got guys that were trained by the British, while they were, stationed in Europe pre-war. So they've got a lot of influence and a lot of experience from preps from when they were at war with the IRA, because those guys were like some of the real pioneers in improvised explosive devices during those kind of battles during that time. So
do you get your pin when you graduate from EOD school?
Yeah, you get a basic pin, and then like 3 years later, then you can basically apply or get recommended to do your senior EOD board. So that's basically the senior board, as to paraphrase it, it's just all tools and procedures. Like how good are you at basically this charge and this scenario and things like that. And then 2 years after that, you're eligible for your master board. So once you graduate, it's 5 years before you get the final NEC.
Is it a different pin each time?
It's just a star that gets added.
Okay, Did you go to jump school?
I did, yeah.
Did you go to Army Airborne jump school?
So I went to Army Airborne as a boat guy in February 2002.
Oh, so you already had that kind of checked off.
Yeah. So
otherwise, is it in the EOD pipeline to get?
It is now. At the time, it wasn't, but they had kind of started it. So 3 weeks Army Airborne.
How many? When you're at EOD school, again, I have my own fantasies about EOD school, I guess, right now. But like, are you blowing shit up?
Oh, I mean, during demo week, we are doing charges. Yeah, yeah. So you're doing electrical and non-electrical cap work. And
but you were there for 10 months, and there's demo week. Like
there's demo. Yeah, there's like demo phase, and that was a couple weeks, and then like at the end, do like the place out there in Florida. I mean, it's the Eglin Air Force Base is one of the largest bases in the States. And they've got demo range where we're doing 1,000-pound shots. So when you do get to experience 1,000-pound, C4 multiple, charges going off. Yeah. So it was sort of like when, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
All right. So then what's next? You get stationed out.
Yeah. So I'm at Mobile Unit 3 in February 2005, go through unit level training, EOD training, the EOD portion of it. And then I find out they put me on basically what they called an NSW platoon. And that wasn't real common that they had put new EOD guys on NSW platoons. And the training officer at the EOD command pulled me in to have basically talk me through why they decided to put me on that. Was because I was a 6-year SWCC guy. Mm-hmm. And they said, this shouldn't be a problem. Like, do you think it's going to be a problem? I said, no, not at all. So they assigned me to SEAL Team 3. And so in August of 2005, I drove out to Nyland. And that was where I met Tasking and Bruiser.
Yeah, right on. Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
It's 110 degrees.
Yeah.
And you show up. How'd you like it?
Well, I walked in the facility. Brian Yarborough was actually the one that told me how to get there. This was MapQuest was the thing. It's like, you go down this dirt road. I'm like, yeah. All right. So I walk in the facility, desert canvas, name tapes, and it's empty. Nobody's in the building. And everybody was sleeping, because you guys had already been there for a week. And come walking down the hall, this guy in, cargo shorts and a hat. And I'm like, that's Tony Frati, and he's like, Kush, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm your EOD guy. He's like, you're in Charlie Platoon. I'm like, okay. And Tony and I were in Guam together in 99. That was the last time I'd seen him, but I was like, immediately recognized him. And then, guys start waking up and they're having breakfast. And it's like, I'm like, hey, Tony, like, what is Tony doing? He's like, he's platoon chief. I'm like, oh, all right.
Oh, yeah. So
that was how it started with, Team 3.
Had you ever done I.E.Ds or anything before?
No. No,
damn,
not like
dude.
that. Yeah, I mean, we did something.
They
taught some stuff to us basically in unit level training, and throughout the years, it's gotten a lot better. The EOD mobile units have basically buffed up a lot of their pre-training before they get cut over. So that is not an issue, because that's a legitimate concern. these guys are really good at EOD stuff, but when we put them in the house, in a kill house, in the turret of a truck, or basically getting shot at and, have to go online and doing left and right peels or center peels or whatever, you've got to be able to, react appropriately. But I did have some weapons fundamentals. Like I was a boat guy, so I know the weapon systems. So it wasn't that foreign. But yeah, then we were doing walkthroughs and went through Nyland with you guys.
Yeah, I had a kind of a pivotal moment in my mind. It was when I was a platoon commander at Team 7, and we were going to get assigned EOD guys. Mm-hmm. And I talked to my CO, and I said, hey, sir, why do we need EOD guys? Let's just send 2 of my guys to an EOD school and have them learn the stuff, and then they can just be good to go.
Be a collateral.
Yeah.
Is the idea. Yeah.
And that's what he said to me. He goes, hey, that's fine, but you actually want someone that is actually focused on this thing. Mm-hmm. And if it's a collateral for a team guy, that they're not going to care about it the way an actual EOD guy is going to care about it. And this made a lot of sense that you want someone that's going to focus and that's their job.
Yeah.
And so that's why when you guys showed up, I was super stoked, and I was like, oh, cool. Now we have, and then on that deployment, I had EOD guys that were awesome, mm-hmm. and they basically became assaulters for us, and then handled EOD as it was their collateral, but it was their primary. And they found some I.E.Ds that definitely could have really jacked up, my platoon at that time. We had one that was sitting in a plant, like a planter vase outside of like the perfect spot where you'd stack to enter a building. There was an I.E.D. in there. And there was a curtain in the house. We found it afterwards. There was the curtain with a plug where you plug this thing in, and there was a literal rectangle cut out of the curtain where you could look outside and see if there's people there or not.
Yeah, when the SWAT stack was there, and you just
yeah. And so we see this wire and we see the thing, and someone's like, "Hey, let's see where this goes." And I remember like being part of the 2 or 3 man people that were walking out. We find it, we're like, "Oh, it goes to this planter." And so, EOD. So they come over and they start like prosecuting it. And my EOD guy looks at me and he's like, hey, Jocko. And I was like, yeah. He goes, you don't have to stand there. And I was like, good call.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm out, bro. Yeah. And so I was super stoked on EOD guys and the value that you guys bring. And so, but I am surprised that you didn't have any I.E.D. experience because you were good at it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate it. Yeah. But, it's, I guess Tony did really good walkthroughs. Yeah. And when you look at it, it made sense, so, it's like, this is happening this way, you're going to go this way. But there was like, some of the stuff that was kind of that I picked up on was like, all right, Hingeman and some of these roles, right? But I mean, it carried forth, and not only was land warfare such a pivotal training block for me, but we actually used it. Mm-hmm. So, a year later. So it was really important. But I remember when Tony, we were sitting in the truck and just waiting, we're like loading up, taking a break. And he comes up to me and he said, hey, for this first run, like, you're not going to go live. Just go through the motions while everybody else is going live. He's like, it's not that we don't trust you. It's that we don't trust you. So I held on. I love that. I'm like, absolutely. And you just say, yeah, Roger, check, no problem. Yeah. And so we do our first night run. And
that actually makes sense. Like, it's not that we don't trust you. It's just that we don't trust you.
It absolutely does. So it wasn't a dig. It's like, it's like, here's your platoon. I totally get it. Right. I mean, because, 2.5 years ago, there was an incident, that happened on the East Coast. So I was like, and I knew about it and I was completely respected it. So I start going live and everything was good. And then we go nighttime and Tony's like, hey, once again, go dry on this one. Don't shoot, just go through the motions. I'm like, no problem. And so I'm sitting there, we're taking contact. I'm sitting there prone. TRADAC guy comes up and he's like, why aren't you shooting? I'm like, Tony told me not to. He said, just going dry for this, first couple. And so, but yeah, I mean, it was great just to understand the motions. And it's like, what I ended up in down the road was that it's so important that you earn the trust of the guys, for the EOD role and coming over and I learned a lot of it as a boat guy, because you're not, you weren't in Bud's class, whatever, and going through Hell Week with whoever. It's like, so you have that much more of a barrier. You have to earn the trust. You have to have, good, mediocre to high performance. but it's the trust that really takes the time and the effort. You know, they got to trust you in the house, trust you on the range, and trust you in the bar. And so that's like, that takes time. And so that was what I adopted, was making sure I earned the trust of the guys, because that way when I made a call the next year, whether we were doing personal security detail or we were in the shit in Western in Al Anbar, they're going to trust me to when I say, get the fuck away from me. So
how was, you'd been around NSW, so it wasn't really too much of a like culture shock or anything to show up and.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, it was awesome, because now instead of being the guy driving the boat, watching them climb the ladder, I was going to be on the ladder, you know, so to speak. So I was pumped. Yeah.
You get done with, you know, so we go through the whole workup, CQC. How was CQC for you?
Phenomenal. Yeah. I loved it. Yeah. I mean, CQC, and then rolling into when we went to Fort Knox for Mount, that was crucial with the guys, because it's like we're doing, you know, live fire, you know, starting from two-man pistol room entries and moving through it was great, because the guys, we meshed great. Stayed in the house with them. Went to, you know, Memphis with the guys, you know, on the weekends. I mean, it was great. It was fast, and it was, I loved it. You know, I mean, it's like, I remember us talking with some of the other new guys, was like, man, how do we only do this block once before we go on deployment? Like, we should have to do this like right before we leave. And we had so much fun and learned so much, you know, and it was all dynamic movements. So it was early on. And so we were learning as we went. And then we went to Fort Knox, and that's when that's where it turned up, you know, the game got turned up. So
yeah, Fort Knox was a pretty awesome trip.
Yeah.
There was a 10 million rounds of paintball fired.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. It was freaking mayhem out there.
No, I love that. And it's funny how it's like, that was such a key block that's where I ended up at the tail end of my career at TRADET, was in that urban combat block as a cadre.
We wrap up, you know, workup. You kicked ass in workup. Didn't you go to free fall like after workup or something like that?
Yeah, it was like my pre-deployment leave. So yeah, I think we did like Hawthorne, we did Nellis, or not Nellis, we did Hawthorne, Fallon, and then we were in Nellis, and that was where I first, I remember I was just telling the story, I think yesterday with Debbie Lee, is that I'm at one of the trucks, and Jake is in a truck behind me, and there's a guy in the turret, like doing some work. And I was like, hey, Jake, who's that? He's like, oh, he goes, that's Mark Lee. He's like, he just got to the platoon. But said you had been with the platoon, but I hadn't seen you guys in a few weeks. And so that was when I first met Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause Mark, so basically when they decided that our task unit was going to Iraq, they gave us a couple guys from one of the other task units. Yeah. And Mark was one of the guys that we got. So he was just showing up, and he showed up for that trip. It was just like completely in his element.
Oh, everybody's a winner.
Yeah, everybody's a winner. It was freaking on.
Yeah.
So Echo Charles.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what a boondoggle is?
Boondoggle.
Okay.
No.
So boondoggle is a trip where you're basically going to go and waste a bunch of the taxpayers' money. And that's what a boondoggle, like a true boondoggle trip is like, oh, we're going to go to Hawaii and we have a meeting with, you know, so-and-so.
It's federal funding, not state funding.
Yeah. So that's what a boondoggle is. And so we get done with our actual unit level training with the training detachment. And now we conduct our own type of training. And it's what we want to focus on. We know we're going to Iraq, and there's a good training site up at Nellis Air Force Base, which is in very close proximity to Las Vegas. So, and we want to do vehicles. So we ended up setting up this trip, and it wasn't a complete boondoggle because we did a bunch of awesome training.
We did.
And as a matter of fact, I was just talking with Ryan Job's parents about how we put him in charge of like a big giant, hit in the training area. And he was, you know, nervous. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. What are you doing putting me in charge of this?
I remember
and
that.
We put him in charge, and that's how people step up and learn.
Yeah.
But not only did we do some awesome training, but we also, you know, had weekends off. And so it was some Vegas time was spent, and very well spent. And that was the classic. Some of these stories about Mark was like, I remember coming down and, you know, we're meeting in whatever time because we're going to roll out. Not on off, but just everyone's going to go out. And I'm walking like through the damn casino, and freaking Mark Lee from like across the casino, he's like, "Hey sir," I'm like, look at him, he's like, "When are the new Cadillacs coming out?" Because he's over there winning, you know. And then everybody's a winner, and he was really, I mean, he was just super charismatic dude and funny. And it's weird too, because he was a new guy, but he was just super confident and super cool.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like if you're a cocky new guy, yeah, man, it's weird. He had a weird balance of like being super confident, but he was self-deprecating enough that it worked.
He had a good switch.
Yeah.
Like, he could really do it.
Yeah.
He I mean, and that wasn't something he mastered by any means. He just was a natural master at it.
Yeah.
Because you're right. He was just like that.
Yeah. And of course he was kind of, he was like a really good athlete, and that helps. And I was actually telling Ryan's dad that yesterday, is he was a good shot at CQC. And so it's hard for an older guy to talk smack to Ryan Job when he just beat him at the freaking head plates. And you're like, yeah, well, And so Mark wasn't there for that. But when he showed up, he was in, he's in good shape, and he's quick, right?
Yeah.
So if you like talk some smack to him, you might end up, a little bit, and listen,
embarrassed.
Yeah,
for
you might
sure.
end up a little bit embarrassed. Now, listen, there's always the gang fu that can get unleashed. So let's say you're a new guy and some older guy talks some shit to you, and you return fire, and you get the upper hand, which Mark was pretty witty. Now you can still catch a beat down, right? You can still have 3 or 4 guys jump on you and you get choked or whatever.
Even if you were right, it's still like just because.
Yeah.
But even if you're right, or you get a little beat down, but your shot was good, you kind of make the person that's giving you a beat down look like a little bit of a fool, right?
Yeah.
So Mark was quick-witted enough that you realize pretty quick that if you talk shit to this guy, you're probably going to end up on the receiving end, and you're not gonna end up looking as cool as you think you are. And so that was kind of the vibe for Mark, and just being super charismatic and funny, and playing blackjack with him when he's talking shit to the dealers.
To the dealer.
Like, oh, they're bringing out the ice man. They're trying to ice me right now. Hey boss, they're trying to ice me. Don't worry about it. I got this. Just freaking, just magnetic. And that's this trip. Was this trip a complete boondoggle, Echo Charles? No, it wasn't. There was highly valuable training took place.
Sure.
And some good times took place.
Team building.
Yes. Some team building took place as well. So that's what we were doing. By the time we wrapped up with all that training, man, everyone had been in charge of, training missions. Everyone was, we actually, unfortunately, had a couple guys didn't make it through the training with Task Unit Bruiser. We lost a couple guys that didn't meet the standard, but everyone that did was freaking dialed in at this point.
No, and I remember when we were at Hawthorne. I remember when we were in the Bay, and that was like when it was, it escapes me like the time frame. I think that was like January. You had said that we got word that we were going to be doing PSD, and there was a lot of deflated people in the room because it's like, man, we don't want to do personal security detail. We want to get into the fight. And I remember he saying like, that's okay, because we're going to be the best fucking PSD element out there, the best PSD task unit out there. And so we were all in, regardless of what it was, because like it was a contagious type of leadership that trickled down, that we were all in from what I felt like from land warfare. And we were all in. This is who we were,
Yeah.
So
it was a tight crew.
It was good. Yeah.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah. But so then go back to that. Yeah, I did free fall, was like pre-deployment leave that I'd actually gotten a Team 3 spot that one of the guys didn't go. So yeah, that was where I first was introduced to that.
Yeah. I went on PDSS and I went to Baghdad. And in Baghdad, we were supposed to take the place of the guys that were working with the ICTF, the Iraqi Counter-Terror Force, and went over there, did like the beginning of the turnover from the guys, and I forget what team they were from that we were going to turn over with, but it was SEALs and Green Berets, met them all, a bunch of good dudes. The ICTF was impressive. They all had like M4s with lasers on them, and they had night vision. It was pretty impressive to see what these Iraqi counter-terrorist force was like, and that has a whole story in its own right. But so it looked like we were going on a pretty cool deployment. I forget about the PSD, if there was something, you know, at some point where that was still a thing. But by the time I went on PDSS, we were going to Baghdad, and we were going to take over that mission, and they were doing a lot of direct action missions in and around Baghdad, and cool op tempo. Like, definitely seemed like it was going to be a cool deployment. Hey, kind of a Mark I motto with above average to like, hey, this is going to be a kick-ass deployment, you know? And I was stoked to go do that. And then while you guys were on pre-deployment leave, what happened was they wanted to consolidate the entire West with under SEAL Team 3 commanding officer. Mm-hmm. So the way it was set up, if we went to Baghdad, we would have been like underneath the East Coast skipper, and the West Coast skipper would have had some East Coast platoon or task unit under his so it would have just been, they just looked at it and said, this doesn't even make sense. Mm-hmm. So now Ramadi at that time was really bad. And for some reason, I had told everyone that before. This was like in the beginning of Workup. Like, I was like, we're going to Ramadi. And I don't know why I had that feeling. But you guys were on pre-deployment leave, and the skipper calls me, and he's like, hey, how would you feel about, you know, if you went to Ramadi instead? And I had to do total poker face, you know. Inside, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, let's. Yeah. Outside, I was like, well, sir, you know, I'm going to need some additional things if I'm going to go over there. And I wanted whatever this high-speed internet thing was, and I wanted a couple more people, and I wanted some more radios. And so I used it all as a big bargaining chip, and he hooked me up. So that was awesome. But I don't even think I don't even know if there was a way to tell you guys. I guess we had cell phones.
We found out on the flight line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was so
like,
late.
I think like a couple of the guys had printouts of like what today's news in Ramadi. They're like, whoa,
yeah,
okay, yeah. I think we found out that day.
Yeah. It was very late, and then we went. The guys that went early, you know, we were just like sending word back. Mm-hmm. And I forget what bird you were on coming over, but there was only probably 4 or 5 of us that went over in the first crew.
Yeah,
to figure out what's going on. And so there you go. Did you, when you were looking at like the news, now you're on the flight line, did you realize like how serious it was?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, but it was more of a, and this is in retrospect, right? So it's sometimes hard for me to kind of go, this is what I felt at the time. But when I look back on it, it was like, we've been told a couple different things. Yeah. When we land, whatever we're told, you know, as long as we're all doing something together, that was really all that mattered, you know.
Yeah, and remember the Commodore pulled. We were sitting in the Commodore. He had a big speech, and he told us, "Listen, chances are no one in this room is going to shoot their weapons." Yeah. He told that to the whole team. He's like, "Chances are no one's going to shoot their weapons on this deployment. That's, you know, but you still got to be professional, and you know, it's still a combat environment, even though you're probably not going to be engaging in one." And we're all like, "Okay, cool, you know, fair enough." I was suspect a little bit because I'm reading the intel, and Ramadi's like, there's casualties every day in Ramadi.
But it was just a matter of like how creative you could get, everybody could get, and whether it would be approved or not.
Yeah.
You know, to go and do any of these things.
Yeah.
So
we show up there. From an EOD perspective, you must have been like what the hell is happening?
No, I mean, so yeah, from an EOD perspective, it was, this is dangerous. This is going to be hard because we're very urban. This is Fort Knox times 1,000. You know, this is the Mount facility times 1,000. And so it was going to be tough, you know, while knowing that all of the personalities and every single person wanted to get into the fight and get, you know, right on the front line and fight. My job, my primary job was to keep the guys safe, you know, and that's what it was, from an I.E.D. threat. But at the same time, I also had to fill the role as an assaulter. So there's this switch that you've got to kind of basically know when to turn it from, you know, this left to right as an EOD guy, as an assaulter, because you have to be able to do 2-man room entries, and you have to be able to cover, and you have to be able to do an I.E.D. And then if there's an I.E.D. there, then the weapon's got to get slung and you have to go to work, because that right there is a non-biased threat. It doesn't discriminate who it's going to kill. So you have to basically go to work. And so that was something that weighed heavily on my mind, especially when we first got there.
There was 7 to 10 I.E.Ds a day on Route Michigan, which is a 3-mile stretch of road.
Yep.
7 to 10 I.E.Ds a day were detonated on that road.
Yep.
When you show up there, you just got to be thinking,
let's not go down this road.
That was the safest road you could go down.
Yeah, but it's just like, man, you're coming, it's like gritting your teeth and wanting to wear, mouth guards, because this going to suck.
Those other like roads going off of that, guaranteed. It's not even like you will hit an I.E.D.
Yeah,
you take a right turn or a left turn off there, I.E.D's coming.
Yeah, and it's like the feeling was it's a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. And then it's like, okay, we're not going to act invincible, but we know how to basically egress a vehicle and do combat first aid and make the calls and do an I.E.D. with a down guy, multiple down people. We know how to, basically take care of a vehicle that's down, to basically destroy all the sensitive equipment. We know how to do this. So it was just second nature. So.
How about that op tempo that kind of kicked in?
Yeah. No, it was, and it got hot quick. It got hot, literally, and then also, in the city.
That's right. It did, like the temperature. We showed up and it was kind of like,
it was like monsoon season.
Yeah, it just freaking temperature just was skyrocketed.
Yeah. And then, when we started going out, I remember we first, discovered working with the 1st 506, which is legendary, man. I still hold that near and dear to my heart to be a part of like the history of Red Currahee, and like, it's just, but yeah, the op tempo was something else, and then, to be out east of the city, working that for a little bit, and then going back west, and then just basically getting more and more dynamic. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it's like, that's what you're there for. It's like, cool, we have a down day, Jim, recover and plan, because we were partitioned into groups to work with, the Jundis, the Iraqi army, you'd be in 5-6 man, teams and everybody, which was great because it really showed, guys on their second and third platoon, how to basically be like these, sort of fill these LPO roles and, of these small teams. And it was great.
Yeah, that was wild. So we had prepared, to function as a task unit and perhaps break into platoons and maybe break into squads. But we ended up having to sort of formulate these elements, these little
like plussed up fire teams.
Yeah, plussed up fire teams that were going to go out because we had 5. I think we ended up with 5 or 6 Iraqi units that we were partnered with. Yeah. And so therefore you needed an element and you needed to have, a senior enlisted guy in there. You needed to have some kind of an officer in there. Well, that was what we tried to build. A senior enlisted guy, an officer, a machine gunner, a radio guy, an EOD guy, which we only had 2. So guess what?
Yep.
Yeah. Guess what?
Yeah. No, I felt like it was like the parent that was just like, just not this extent, like don't spread me out this thin, but that's what we had to do, so
yeah, two EOD guys to cover down on 6 different units, which basically means you're going.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did, which may or may not have been psychological warfare, but we would have strap hangers come in, like people from from different commands or different units would show up, and or leadership or whatever. We call them strap hangers. But people that are not part of Task Unit Bruiser would come in. And you guys put together this freaking like mega EOD brief that was about all the I.E.D. threats. And you would basically give that brief before the PLO, before the op order. And you probably gave it like 3 times to the boys, right? And then eventually the boys were like, hey, all right. And if there was an update to that brief, you'd give the update. Yeah. But if there was no update, you'd be like, hey, same threats.
Well, what that brief was like, it would be contingencies because we never planned on like, we're going to go to an I.E.D. factory. That's not what you do with an assault force, right? You prosecute that with basically like the guys that do prosecute I.E.D. labs. And, but the contingencies would sometimes evolve as the different TTPs of the enemy would evolve, and then that's where we would plug in a little bit different on contingencies, and we would just highlight if that was a change, because we were always studying any of the significant activity or new TTPs. It was a game of chess, like they would do this, we would do that. I mean, that's historic, and especially in asymmetrical warfare, that's just the nature of it. It's like the TTP start changing, you have to respond and react, and then try to counter that. And so that's where we would then update those briefs on like, okay, new contingency if this happens, or if this is what we might see. But overall, the calls were always the same. It was like this color chem light. If you see one of us take a knee, get the fuck out of the room, and be like, hey, do you need anything? Don't key up a radio. It's just stuff like, common sense stuff that always stayed the same.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the psychological warfare that I was talking about was if we had one of these strap hangers show up, you would give like this full EOD brief that was like a half an hour long that showed twisted vehicles that have been blown up, all the different types of I.E.Ds, and it scared the shit out of people.
I just wanted people to appreciate what was going on.
Freaking sketch people out. And this is one of the examples I talk about. My first deployment to Iraq, we would drive at basically the max speed of the Humvee, 60 miles an hour, super tight, close together, totally blacked out. And haul ass. And when we got ambushed a few times, and every time we were like through the ambush and never took an RPG round or an I.E.D. that hit us.
Yeah, or effective fire just wasn't.
Because we would be past it. And then you fast forward to our deployment, and white lights out on the road, searching the ground, vehicles going 1 mile an hour, spaced out. Like, that's just radically different.
And it still radically didn't make any sense as far as like a combat effective, but you're more now defensive, and you're playing the reactive game. Because if you do get hit doing 60 miles an hour, that vehicle is probably going to, depending on how big the charge is, it's going to flip, and now it's the idea was, let's try to spot it. Yeah. Cool, we'll spot it and then back out and go a different way,
Remember that time we came in from south and we rolled and like whoever was on point, might have been Johnny, was like, hey, looks like there's something, and you guys got out and looked at it, and we drove over it, and then like 2 hours later, Dagger found a freaking triple stacked I.E.D. in there.
Yeah, there was a command wire and one of the drivers, one of our guys got out and I remember being in the vehicle behind him. He got out driver's side to like pick up this wire. I'm like, whoa. Did I not teach you anything? It's like, yeah, this is something, so, but, and it was funny because that night he goes, man, I'm sorry. I'm so dumb that I did that, but yeah, thankfully we
but Dagger later found like the full on.
Yeah. On that route. I don't know if that was it at that location, but it was definitely on that route. Yeah.
Bro, we got lucky with a lot of that shit.
That
was like the other time where I think, we were at Cop Falcon. We had just taken down Cop Falcon, and we're all sitting up there. Most of you dudes are asleep. Chris Kyle's got freaking, what is it, Chef Boyardee or something all over his face because he's asleep. And Dagger was going down, and they found an I.E.D. right in front of Cop Falcon, and Leif is watching. He's got his head over the freaking the wall, watching them prosecute this thing with the digger. And I think you were like, hey, dude, that might not be the best place to hang out and watch this happen.
Yeah. Well, and there was, and at the same time, what they had a tendency to do, because if they didn't get support from, from the forks, basically from those guys running that thing, then they blew those things up all the time. Not their fault, but they were just trying to prosecute suspect devices. There was a trench. It would have been just west of where we set up Cop Falcon. And what they would do is they would burn. I mean, if there was a lot of vegetation, they would burn it, because what that would do is it would either sympathetically detonate it, or it would expose any ordnance or any I.E.Ds. And they had done a burn, and there was a bunch of small little 82 millimeter mortars that were all like wired up, but they had burnt out all the circuitry system and everything, and it never detonated, but it was like sitting right there. And and we had crossed right over it, Yeah.
It's pretty quick, like how he gets hurt.
Oh man, that was like in the first 2 or 3 weeks, I think. 3 or 4 weeks now.
We end up putting in Cop Iron, which was, again, there's some those operations stand out because they were big.
Well, they were joint. They weren't just us, you know, and when I look back on it, the remarkable part that because like I said, you know, from the beginning, we were all in, but what you guys did was not just go in there and be like, hey, conventional forces, you're here to support me. It was, what can we do to support you? Because without bragging about it, but it's like, we have these capabilities and these assets that we can then support you. What are you guys doing? And then working with them on how we can plug in to be involved, you know, with it. And that was, I think that was such a huge change, not only for that region, but for a lot of part of the war, was that all of a sudden, you know, soft guys want to support us. Like, that's kind of a new look. I mean, to be able to work with, and later on, you know, working with like a lot of the Army units. I mean, like I said, first the 506, and then later on in my career with 10th Mountain, it was just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, those are iconic, huge, like in my world that you look up to, and you know, to be a small part of their mission was phenomenal.
Yeah, the relationships up and down across the chain of command, you know, that's what it's all about. And you absolutely had to. I mean, you can't go into, you can't just start walking around in someone's battle space. I mean, you will 100% die.
You can, you're just not going to get supported.
You're going to get shot.
Yeah. And there's not going to be a quick reaction force to necessarily help you.
Yeah.
So.
How much did you go and, like, what other EOD elements were there? Did you go talk to Dagger? Did you go, because you would bring back, you had like pictures of I.E.Ds. Were you getting those from those guys?
Yeah, so we would go over and talk to them, and it was funny because I don't remember the time frame, but Tony and I actually did a ride along.
Yeah. I remember that because I approved it.
Yeah, because you had to get...
Yeah, and I'm like, dude,
well,
okay, boys.
And I remember the what you came back with, because it was a Navy team that had ripped into Ramadi that was doing I.E.D. response, and you know, I knew a couple of them, and I was like, hey man, we go ride along, and the response initial was like, so, and I think you asked me this, so what happens if you die? And that means T. Ramadi is down an EOD guy. That's kind of problematic. And Tony was like, I'll go with him, you know, and
because that'll help.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because Tony comes out, we're mounted by the vehicles. This is him and I, and he goes, hey, if they find something like a wire going to a house, I'm 1 year 2. I'm like, okay. Thanks, wait.
Tony.
Yeah.
It was rad riding in the back of those things though. Like in the back of Dagger.
Yeah.
Because in a Humvee, at night vision on, you're like, can't see anything. It's just all freaking hunkered down. But riding, like I did rides in the back of Dagger, getting from east to west, right?
Right.
And dude, it was so chill. They had air conditioning in there.
Yeah.
And because you don't have a job, right? They're working, they're prosecuting stuff and looking, but you're just kind of sitting there. And you're just like, and they turn white lights on, so you just get to look around. It was pretty wild. And that was another funny story. Was Tony was, I think he was riding back from Corregidor, and he was in a Dagger or something.
Oh yeah, so you catch a ride with those guys sometimes. Yeah.
And they like stopped, and this was like, that was the first time we went over there. Now he's going back, and so he wasn't too familiar. And he's like, he's listening, and they're like, you know, like, we got something up here. Yeah, this looks like something. Hey, we got an EOD, we got an I.E.D. up here. And he said he's sitting in the back, and he's like, by I.E.D., do you mean improvised explosive device? Like, he was like, damn, we're sitting on it, because that's what we're saying. They were like, we're sitting on one and we need to back up or something like that. It was just classic kind of Tony, you know. You mean improvised explosive device? Like, we're about to get blown up.
I later on, like in Afghanistan, I had done a ride along with those guys again, and I mean, and you know, terrain in Afghanistan is obviously very different, but it's like 14 hours, man. God. So it may have been air conditioning. It was nice, you know, and everything like that. But holy shit!
Oh yeah, belay my last. I wasn't trying to make any kind of statement.
Yeah, no, I know you weren't.
What those guys were doing, and it was awesome when General McFarland was on, and same thing with Colonel Dean. Like those guys, like Colonel Dean was talking about it. He says, you know, I would get the Dagger guys, which was these route clearance guys. He's like, I would get them for, I forget what the number was, but it was, you know, 3 days a week for 4 hours. And they'd go out into Tamim and they'd drive around and get blown up and those guys did that every night for, like you said, 14 hours a night or whatever it was, crawling along on the streets, waiting to get blown up. And yeah, there's some guys that are in the mine-proof vehicles. They also have an element of guys that are in Hummers on security that are holding security for those guys. Those guys just night after night after night. And by the way, those quote mine-resistant vehicles, they were not always mine-resistant. And those things were taken out. Guys were killed inside those vehicles. So the scene over there from that I.E.D. perspective was freaking crazy.
Well, there was anything that we did, we couldn't do without those guys and without guys like that. Because I remember we would request like a clearance before, we would do a route, a few hours or whatever ahead of time. Because the way and I'm sure it's changed, it all depends on geographics and threat in the areas, but there would be like an 8 vehicle package. And then one of the vehicles would be specifically EOD response. So they're waiting for whatever they're prosecuting. And then they're like, okay, we've gone as far as we can. They'll back out. And then the EOD team goes to work. And it's like, so that's, a scene could take 4 or 5 hours once they find something. So now everybody's trying to stay awake, it's just, So,
we inserted guys off of Dagger a few times, like sniper elements. Yeah. Cause then it would be kind of a clandestine way to do it. Cause those things are out there. But I remember you could not rely on the timeline at all.
Nope.
Because you were going to say, oh, just get them 600 meters down this road and they can get inserted. That 600 meters might take 6 hours or 4 hours when it should take 20 minutes because they have to just dig out I.E.D. after I.E.D. after I.E.D. after I.E.D. It's freaking totally ridiculous. And that's why when Task Unit Bruiser started putting sniper teams out and killing those I.E.D. emplacers, man, those freaking Army guys and Marines were freaking pumped.
Yeah.
Especially when we would do it like, there was an I.E.D. that killed 2 soldiers in this spot. Cool. Sniper Overwatch. 3 days later, kill an enemy emplacer.
Yeah.
And it was like those Army guys they were so freaking thankful, thankful that we were able to make that happen. When that opening thing that I read, that was like, again, the enemy was changing TTPs all the time. And that the 3-8 Marines had been in an Overwatch and they were leaving the Overwatch. And as they left the Overwatch, boom, hit an I.E.D.
Yeah, I think that was in the Firecracker era.
Yeah, it was in Firecracker era. Yeah.
No, I remember that. And we read the report on it. We're like, okay, so if at any point we're not going to have a mutually supporting Overwatch, if we have 2 Overwatch positions, you have got to see my primary means of exit, of egress, and I've got to see yours. In that case, we had a mutually supporting, but they couldn't see. And that apartment complex only had 1 door. And so I remember when the guys were making entry, I took a knee on the right side of the door, and there's like 2 or 3 little mud steps, and the ground was really hard. It was really hard packed. I remember thinking to myself, this would take them a minute to bury something. So if something does get placed here, it's going to be on the surface. So that should be easy if we do see something. But we had to clear. So that was our SOP, was to clear the door if it wasn't mutually supporting. And then we started just clearing the door before the platoon we would basically make egress out of it from another angle, either above it, a couple stories, or basically however, we just had to be able to look at the door before the platoon exited. So because that SOP, what that TTP that they were doing was they would shoot at you, drive a car, kick out an I.E.D. or bury one, and then take off. And then the idea was during that firefight, you take a casualty, you have to then bring trucks in, leave, and then they detonate it as you're leaving because they can see you. But it was never our MO to leave during a firefight because we just had you would think there were 6 people in there, but there'd be 26 people in there. So we just never got into a scenario where we had to hot extract out of a building.
Yeah. And that right there, that story is like exactly why when my old commanding officer said, hey, you want someone that's thinking about EOD? A team guy walking up to a door to go set an Overwatch isn't going to be thinking, hey, let me touch this ground and think about how long it's going to take to emplace something. They're not thinking about that. And they wouldn't be thinking about that, even if they went to EOD school.
Sure.
They would not have that mindset to make that.
And that
happen.
wasn't something like we learned in EOD school. That was like we read the reports and it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do from now on,
And by the way, that's what when Team 5 replaced us. That's exactly what happened to them.
Yeah, they had 3 positions, from what I understand, and then
they were getting shot up. I think they had a guy get wounded, and they decided to exfil. And when they exfil, they hit a massive I.E.D. that thankfully didn't kill anyone, but it certainly gave catastrophic, life-changing injuries to a couple guys.
Yep.
Cop Falcon gets put in, and that's the other thing is interesting about these like big operations. You have to. It's totally joint. You're working with Iraqis, working with Army or Marines, and the planning process. And I didn't realize this. So General McFarland came on, and one of the things that he wanted to do, and I just, when I look at the dates, his goal was to do a battalion-sized operation every 3 or 4 days. That's why these things took place. Like, they seem, in my mind, they always seem like, oh, we did cop. Like, if I was to ask you how long was it between like putting in Cop Iron and putting in Cop Falcon and putting in the hospital, how long do you think that was in between those?
A couple months, probably. I think 2 or 3 months.
It was like probably 2 weeks.
Oh,
like it's crazy. I know.
I wouldn't have. Yeah.
So like,
wow.
You look at it and you're like, oh my gosh. And you know, I have the dates of when these things happened. And it's like, oh yeah. It was like, oh, as a matter of fact, when Cop Falcon and Cop Hawk, which is the hospital, those were planned to be simultaneous at the same time. And actually they bumped one of them because they wanted to have us in there overwatching it. So, but they just bumped it by like 2 days. So all these operations were just like boom, 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 boom.
Wow.
And it was like, oh yeah, you guys can come back for a day, reload, refit, and you're going to go do another one. And that's what it was like.
Yeah, that really felt like it was a couple months, not a couple weeks.
I know. The whole thing is, it was nuts. And that was the logistics behind that.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about this with Colonel Dean, because Colonel Dean, you know, he was a battalion commander, so he doesn't really, he would be surprised. He's like, oh, somehow there's another freaking 200 Texas barriers that just showed up. Like, he didn't have to think about it because they were just there. But like the logistics that it took to make that happen, and to have every 2 or 3 days another 200 or 300 Texas barriers show up in Ramadi ready to go out and put around a combat outpost. There was freaking crazy amount of stuff going on. And it was also, it was awesome that so many of these big operations, it was SEALs going in first. It was SEALs going in first to Cop Iron. It was SEALs going in first Cop Eagles. It was SEALs going in first Cop Falcon. Those guys, they wanted us out there so bad. And it was what I was talking about before. Like, once Dagger came through to clear, that was so critical for them. Dagger would come through to clear. They would love if we had eyes on. If we had snipers overwatching that clearance and then watching to make sure. That was one of the, I wouldn't say it was a go, no go, but man, they were appreciative. And it was almost a go, no go.
But that goes back to, like, at the platoon level, that's a trust thing that was developed, you know, internally, and then we just had to basically, you know, the scope just got bigger, and so they had to develop these trustful and these trust relationships with these units. And that was something that I think that I learned and I observed was that that I really carried over even into my life now, is really bridging gaps with units, with relationships, with people, with other organizations. I mean, that is so much, I found that it's so much more effective, and then just basically, hey, look at me, this is what I'm doing, this is what we're capable of doing. But building that trust and find that the mutually benefiting elements of these relationships are completely, like, they're so much more effective this way. And so that was like that was my first real look at what, in the positive light of calling what the war machine is, because that's what it was. It's like, you talk about all these like new, HESCO barriers or all this other stuff shows up. Guys just go to work. You know, I mean, yeah, there's a bit of self-preservation with it, but they just knew. And then that's where all that decentralized leadership really kind of comes into play. It's like, guys just know that this is their role. You know, this is the machine that has to happen. So
this whole time, obviously there's people getting wounded, there's people getting killed. I knew, I just didn't think it was possible to continue to do that and be lucky forever. Like if you guys were rolling out and I wasn't going on an op, it was like I would have the most horrible feeling, right? And not to be like fatalistic, but you just look at the numbers, man. Just look at the numbers of going out tonight, going out the next night, going out the night after that, going out the night after that, going out the night after that. It's I don't know if I was the only person that was looking at it going, the luck is going to run out, man. At some point, it's just you can't drive down Route Michigan that many times. You can't go on a foot patrol that many times. You can't get in that many gunfights and you just can't get that lucky. Or at least I had the feeling like at some point someone's going to get wounded, someone's going to get killed. And the wounded came pretty quick. And then there was guys getting shot in the camelback, guys getting shot in the chest plate, guys getting shot in the helmet. I mean, when guys are getting shot in the camelback, the chest plate, the helmet, the back plate, did you have that feeling, or did you have the indestructible feeling?
Oh God, no. I mean, it was, one doesn't develop courage by ignoring fear. It's by basically going into it. And so, it felt like it was coming. And we did do a shift, like, in July, we did do a shift. We stopped in the afternoons and we started focusing on the mornings, because the afternoon and the evening is kind of the witching hour, right? It was like where it was like starting to cool off, and then, prayer time, and then that's when the activity would start. So we started focusing on the mornings. But yeah, it got nerve-wracking and scary. It was then when we were actively in firefights, that it was like there wasn't fear. It was before it. It was when it was quiet, when it wasn't happening. Because like in firefights, we were like in our element. This is like, fuck, this is actually kind of fun. We're effectively fighting as a unit, and we are laying down fire superiority, and we are making our moves and making our calls and moving. But it was when it was quiet, was when it was most unnerving. And even planning, it was unnerving. It's like, we are going fucking where? And what just happened? Okay. But I say we, but I think I can speak for just about everybody on that, but myself was like, well, this is war, and this is bigger than just me and just us. This is the machine. We're supposed to be here to liberate this entire region, to basically make them, this is what we were charged with. But disagree with it or agree with it politically or not, it doesn't matter. This is what we're here for. You don't expect a unit like us to go and not bring everybody home. They weren't really necessarily trained for that. Trained for down man procedures and things like that. And of course, like the cadre down's the biggest guy, because you got to be prepared to carry the biggest guy, win the firefight, and then treat combat first aid. But when it shows that our unit is not invincible, it's a stark reality. And I think that the wounds that have lasted for decades afterwards was really unexpected. But I miss them all, man. It was, but it's war. It's war, and there's not a course or a training block that you take or you go to during unit level training or any advanced training that teaches you how to deal with that, and that is a reality. I think it's more glossed over and some ego that it's like, if I get shot, fine, whatever. And, just do this for, for my family or whatever. But I think that when it starts to get real when guys are getting hurt, just like you said, and it's like, you start to get that gut feeling that it's not a matter of if, but when. And you try to move and predict how it could happen and then counter that with different SOPs and go here at this time and use the nighttime and all of your different advanced equipment and advanced procedures that you do. And then out of nowhere.
Yeah. Mark, being the lead turret gunner, right? And that lead turret gunner, bro, that guy is exposed, and he would just be up there night after night, heading out, and I remember I wasn't going out, so I'd be out there, and actually it was awesome because when you guys were going out, everyone, like in the task unit, the non-SEALs, the support guys, everyone would be out there kind of seeing you all off. And I remember talking to Mark and, like, you good? He's like, I'm good to go. Just
it's who we are.
Yeah. Just awesome.
Yeah. But that's contagious too, man. Like, cause like the, fear and, questioning, I mean, that spreads like, it's like wildfire. But so does the optimism. I mean, this is what we're here to do. Like it or don't. I mean, even over there, it's still a volunteer program. Yeah. You can, but it's nice that it never comes to that. And so the support piece from the guys and to each other started when we were first, formed up. And that's how you can tell. So,
so Ryan gets wounded, freaking horrifically wounded. You guys get him out of there. You go back to Cop Falcon. Army's identified some spots where they think the insurgents are. They're in one of the biggest gun battles, and by gun I mean all guns. Like, they're using main gun rounds. And they ask Leif, hey, we think we know, can you guys come out and hit these guys? Can you guys hit some of these targets? Leif calls me like, hey, this is what they want, and can we help them? And to me, it wasn't really even a decision. It was, hey, the Army, who has supported us over and over and over and over again, need help, we'll help them. And I was like, yep, go. And that's when Mark gets killed. And then all that, and especially because it's like Mark and Ryan, just two freaking just badass with that energy and that immortal like vibe. Gone. And when you're talking about, we don't really train. Yeah, we train for the down man. We train for the immediate medical. We train for this. Like, the war's not over. I mean, not at all. Mm. And okay, we're gonna have we're gonna see him off. We're gonna stand down for a day, 2 days, and then guess what? Going back out. That's what's happening. And there is no it's not like, it's not like playing roulette where what people think roulette is like, oh yeah, well, if it's been black, 10 times in a row, it's definitely going to be red this time. Nope, it doesn't work like that. You took a casualty today, you could take one tomorrow. You could take one the day after that. Doesn't matter. It's it's get gear back on and go back out there. And yeah, I you know, for me, it was like there was no school, there was no class on any of this. And I remember you made this freaking video, like a memorial video for Mark, and you were showing it in the Tactical Operations Center, and like to basically confirm that it was all ready to play at the memorial service or something like that. It was my first time seeing it, and I'm standing there, I'm watching it, and I remember like I got done with it, I was just done. And I remember turning around, walking out, and I was just trying to not break down in front of you and the rest of the people in the talk. And I just turned out of there, walked out of there, and just went outside and just broke down by myself alone, because you know, there's a certain point where you're like, okay, yeah, this is not, you know, this is too much right now. And that was that moment for me. Like I watched your video and got done with it. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna break right now. And I did. Went outside and freaking by myself, got my shit together. But everybody, I also knew, like, I was like, everyone is having this. Everyone is having this. And what we have to do is move forward. That's one of the things, you know, that's, and I remember telling you guys this, like when we got together, I was like, hey, we're going to go back to work. And I remember the look on everyone's faces was like, you know, everyone's a little bit different. But everyone, it was the one common language that I think that everyone had was, we go back to work. Hey, I'm scared, I'm horrified, I'm pissed, I'm angry. All those emotions could all be turned into going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. That was what you have to do. That's what dad and father figure teaches you when you fall off your bike at, you know, 3 or 4 years old. You have to get back on it. You can't be afraid of it. I mean, this is what we're doing. And I remember what if it had been me and not Mark, you know, and Mark was sitting in that room. Yeah, we do have to get back to work. You know, we'll grieve and we'll memorialize and we'll carry on, but it's not going into a corner, you know, for the rest of the last 2.5 months of deployment and not doing anything. You have to show and be resilient. God doesn't just give you resilience and strength and discipline. He gives you opportunities to develop those things. That's one hell of a way of sending that message, but that's what it was. It's like, we have to get back to work. And notoriously, every unit is known for that. You have to. You know, Mark was, God, he was such a good 60 gunner. You know, when fucking, I mean,
Hell yeah.
fucking animal, dude. That dude would carry that thing. I mean, he got big on deployment, and he would carry that thing without a sling. And when Ryan was shot and we're bounding back to Cop Falcon, you know, we're stopping at intersections and we had, you know, people passing, and I would see, I'm holding on an intersection with, you know, people coming up and we're bumping each other out. And he would come sprinting up like an Indian sprint from the back, bump me out, be like, I got it. And I'd look back at him and there'd be like another 8-10 people behind him, and they would all go past him, and he would clean up the rear, and then he would sprint past and clear. I mean, it's like, bro, I mean, that soccer stamina's kicking in right now, dude. But he was an animal. He was a machine. And the great thing about the way with it, you know, you and Mama Lee and Leif, you know, guys like myself and other guys that are, you know, Bobby, we have done a good thing in continuing to make sure his legacy and his story is not lost. and we do memorialize him the right way. I mean, there's, Andy had said it really well a couple years ago, or a year and a half ago. He said, a lot of people can't, just your average American can't name a name of somebody that died in World War II or Korean War or Vietnam, and the list goes on. And because this long stretch of combat operations, spanning over 20 years has involved so many people, it's the right thing to do, is to continue every August 2nd and every March 20th. I'm utilizing the social media to get the message out there to people that knew him and the people that didn't know him. That's what he meant to us. Not how he died, but really how he lived. It was inspirational. So, I was doing talking about him a while back, and I said that he was a very spiritual man. He was quiet about it. And he was a family man, quiet about it. He's a great soccer player, not quiet about it. But, I often, and I struggled for a long time after his passing. And my way of putting the pieces back together was just to not face it and get right back on a platoon, get right back into something else. I mean, I think that's how you deal with, sadness, some bouts of depression and loss, is you just got to get back to work. And even, today with guys, that retire, you have to get to work. Build something within yourself, build something with your family, find a new trade craft, but you have to get to work, because if you sit dormant, you will not recover, and you will not heal, and you will not continue to grow. But you have to get back to work.
Yeah.
Because I know that's what he would have done.
Yep. That's what he wanted. That's what he would have done. That's what Bagels was telling us to do.
That's exactly what he was telling us. He's like, don't feel sorry for me.
Get back to work.
Yeah.
And again, we were not unique at all. Mm-hmm. We were not unique at all. The Army and Marine Corps companies and platoons and battalions that we were there, that were with us, we were not unique at all. They lost 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 guys. Team dealer, 25% casualties. Charlie Company, 1st of 506, I forget, but it's just so many of these units lost so many guys. And the things that we're talking about right now, they went through the same things. And guess what they did? They went back and they did their job. And till the end. And when Mikey got killed September 29th, was it his actual last mission? It was close. I can tell you that. It was close. And, might he have done one more? Maybe. But it was close. And what was he doing? He was working. That's what the boys were out working. And again, we were not unique. People, the 11 AD extended for an extra 3 months. They lost another 20 guys in their extension, or 20 odd guys. I don't know what the number is, but they lost people. They were supposed to go home. No, you're staying an extra 3 months. Oh, by the way, you're going to lose another however many people that is. And that's the key component, what you just talked about. And it was what I said, what you said is get back to work. Now listen, at some point, you got to take a breather. At some point, you got to take a breather, and I'm sure we'll get to that. We lose Mikey, September 29th. When did you go home? Do you remember?
I made it in time. Well, I got back for Mikey's funeral.
That must have been just crazy.
Yeah.
To be we're in Ramadi and now we're home and we're going to Mikey's funeral.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to see Debbie Lee. I mean, it's, and wanted to make sure that she was not at all, that she was taken care of, at least welcomed by us coming, getting off that plane. This was really awesome that she was there. Yeah, I mean, I think if I remember right, his funeral was on the 11th or 12th of October. Mm-hmm. And I think we got back like the 9th or 10th, like right before. And, yeah, we weren't, we were doing that for the family, but because it was so significant, we were also doing it for the entire community. I mean, the turnout was phenomenal. And that support was all for the family and for each other. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, it's a huge, huge loss within 2 months. But then, yeah. And it didn't take any time personally, a little bit, but I got right back to work in November and I got assigned back to SEAL Team 3, Charlie Platoon.
And this is now Stoner took this over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you actually got married 2006.
I got married, about a month and a half before we deployed.
Okay. So you were married while we were on deployment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she's a psychologist. Where was she in her schooling at this point?
She was
she psychoanalyzing you already?
She never has done that. and doesn't do that today. So at that point, she was still doing her internship, and because she had done her master's and her doctorate through Pepperdine, mm-hmm. and we had met through friends. And when within a week of me getting to San Diego in March of 2005, and funny story too is I had told Biggles when we were at Shaw's in October of 2005 that, and we'd only, her and I had only been together like 6 months, and I told him that I was considering proposing to her in December, and then at a later time, Biggles and I were out going. He wanted to go grab Sonic or something, Biggles. And he asked me. He goes, "Hey man, like you're talking about proposing, like how do you know?" And I said, "Well, I'm at that age where she is like, not to sound cliche or cheesy, but she's rounding off everything like in my life. And she's the one that I want to spend the rest of my life with." And I said, "Keep in mind, I'm not that much of a planner, right? Like 5 year, 10 year, but I do know that whatever I end up doing, she's going to keep me in check." And I like to think that was when he first started the consideration of proposing to Kelly. Yeah. And later on that, he had mentioned it, like after we all got back and everything, he had mentioned that. He's like, "Hey man, like that chat, like, yeah, that was cool." Fuck yeah, don't put this on me, dude.
I've actually had that chat probably 4 times where people would ask me like, "Hey, how'd you actually like know?" Like they're looking for some magic answer.
Well, what I would tell guys is marry up, don't marry down.
Yeah, that's true.
Marry up. I mean, she was gonna, she finished her internship and was doing her dissertation, and eventually, finished and graduated with her doctorate out of Pepperdine. So, in clinical psychology. And that's the same people would ask me the same thing. Like, she analyze you? I mean, she could do her second dissertation on just me alone. Yeah.
So the attitude going into now, you go back into task unit at, Seth's running it. I remember him. He's like, "We're not task unit bruiser."
Yeah,
he would say that. He's like, "We're not task unit bruiser."
Yeah,
he's like, it's not happening. He's like, "I'm not doing it." He's like, "I'm not taking it. That's you. You're good. Like, we're not task unit bruiser." I was like, "Whatever." Dude.
That's cool. I didn't know he said that. Yeah, he never echoed that to us. So
yeah, he but the conversation was when we got home. He's like, I'm getting out."
Oh, wow.
I was like, because Seth, right? He's very emotional, and would, there's a lot of, he wouldn't show it, but like when he didn't like someone, it really bothered him. When someone was a backstabber, when someone was weak, when someone like just there's a lot of people that he would get very frustrated with. And so, you know, he comes home, he's like, I'm getting out. And I was like, dude, like chill. And and then so finally he's like, I finally convinced him. He's like, well, I'll go to language school. So he's going to go to language school and learn French. And then he's like, and then I'll get out. Or then I'll do something, or I'll do a freaking an ops tour, and then I'll get out. So I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like, dude, because then they needed a task unit commander. I go, bro, you should do this task unit commander. And he's like, no, fuck that, these guys, blah, blah, blah. And I go, dude, just do it. And he goes, I don't fuck do this shit again. Like, these freaking trade act guys. And I'm like, I'm the OIC of trade act. Yeah. And he was like, all right. And he literally walked right down to the XO's office. It's like, hey, I'll take this task unit. That was 100%.
Yeah. And he took the same task unit.
Yeah. So that's how that went down. But the other thing I told him was like, hey, dude, like, you're going to go over there on deployment. There's not going to be shit going on. Mm-hmm. Go out, train jiu-jitsu, get jacked, and freaking play guitar. Like, no factor. And he was like, hell yeah. You know, so freaking guys kicked ass in the workup and everything. And, you know, those kind of became famous last words. But April, we went to D.C. It was April of 2008. You guys were all locked and loaded to go on deployment, but they had the ceremony for Mikey Mansour, Medal of Honor for being presented to his parents at the White House. And they turned that into really powerful and meaningful thing where basically they gave out task unit awards. So they brought everyone out there.
Yeah.
Biggles was out there with Trey, his dog. Like, it was freaking, it was awesome.
It was there was a ceremony at the Navy Museum, the Pentagon, and then the White House. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah. That was an awesome time. Yeah. It was
So when I got back and then was basically going to take over, you know, go to another team at the EOD command that was going to get paired up. They want to be back with SEAL Team 3, which I respected the consistency. It's like, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm going to know half of those guys, and then, like, you know, it's good. The rapport is going to be there, and it's going to be easy to bridge that gap, and I can help get the guys on the EOD platoon ready for, you know, when we get through EOD, ULT, unit level training. That'll be easy for me to get them brushed up on getting ready for I.E.Ds, CQC, etc. So my mindset was, I need to put all this in a package and pass it on as quick as possible. I think within about 2 or 3 weeks of me getting back, I went and sat down with a team that was getting ready to go. That was, their ADVON was already gone. Some of the EOD guys were waiting to go with Team 5. And I was like, here's what's going on. Here's, you know, and it was just a matter of just trying to pass on this information as quick as possible. And I obviously told them, it's like, look, TTPs are going to change, SOPs will change, and everything. It's a chess game. But this is just everything. So I felt like I had so much information that just I couldn't keep to myself. I had to get it out, you know, to as many people as I could. And so they put me in a training cell for a couple months before I got on that platoon to go back with Seth. And so that's what I was doing. I'm like, here. And so we just would put together scenarios and break down. And we even had a couple of teams come through, and we sat down and briefed them on, if you lose a guy, you know, recommendations, if you're going out. I mean, this is stuff we started doing. Was like, before we went out, before I'd go out on an op in 2006, I'd pack and put my laptop and a bag on my bed. So that way I was easy to, you know, if I was injured, that's what was going to Germany with me. So it wasn't taxing the guys to pack up my shit in my room. So just trying to explain that, because nobody explained that to us, you know, and this is what happens. This is how it goes when somebody gets hurt, you lose a guy, you know, the emotional onslaught of it. And then formed back up with Team 3, Charlie Platoon, and felt right at home. So
that's actually what I did too, in the fact that, you know, getting done with that deployment, and the admiral, who had been the admiral's aide, whatever, probably 2 years or a year and a half earlier, you know, so I knew him, and he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go to TRADET. I want to go to TRADET. I want to pass on what I learned, and I want to make sure that these guys know what they're doing when they go over there.
Yeah.
And that was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, as quick as possible.
Yep.
It's like, it's fresh. I was just there,
Yep.
here.
Yeah.
You know?
And we changed a lot of training. Like we
Oh,
stepped it up, and the guys that were there before training, the SEAL teams does great training most of the time. And so the training that we went through together was great, freaking outstanding. And we were able to take that and even go harder and go better. And then, yeah, like I said, we did that ceremony. You did the workup. We did that ceremony. You end up going on deployment again, 2008. The plan is, you guys are all gonna get jacked and, play guitar, whatever, take college courses, all that stuff. You guys show up, and there was actually senior leadership in country that had been in Ramadi, who said, "Oh, those guys are back. Let's do something down in Sadr City." That was kind of the genesis of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And so they get tasked, Team 3 gets tasked with sending a troop into Sadr City to go and basically provide overwatch as they're building this wall down there. And they ended up putting together an ad hoc crew. Ended up, instead of just taking one task unit and putting them in there, they ended up assembling like 3, 4, 5 guys from various platoons, East and West Coast, different troops. Probably not ideal to do that in some aspects. Like if you haven't worked directly with people before, look, everyone went through buds. Everyone knows what an I.E.D. is, but even in platoons, there's will be like a little different. Now you're talking different troops. There can be more difference. Now you're talking different coasts. And we did our best. When we would always get together, we'd meet with the East and West Coast. We'd get together. We'd go over TTPs. We'd make sure that we were in the same, in the same lane, on the same sheet of music. But still, just like groups of friends, groups of friends have different sayings. Mm-hmm. Well, 2 different platoons, they have little different sayings in them.
An echo for the East and West Coast thing, that's called a curriculum review.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Hopefully we're doing that in Vegas as well. But you guys get put together. Seth is actually put in charge of it. It gets called Det Defender, which I want to say one of the assistant platoon commanders came up with that. Mm-hmm. Seth told me the story. He said, "What should we call it?" And the guy said, "Defender." Boom, done. St. Michael becomes the symbol.
2 weeks. I was out west. We were building racks in our new rooms way out west. 2 weeks. And then they're like, "Hey, we got a meeting." And we go in so they're forming a team, and it's going to be working out of Baghdad International Airport, going into Sadr City. But they're only going to take like 4 or 5 guys from each platoon. And I look at Johnny and I'm like, "Watch, check this out." They're like, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And they're like, "And Nick." I'm like, "Told you," so.
EOD up, right?
Yep. Yeah,
and so you had the experience, and Stoner.
Yeah. Well, he's a troop commander, so, so that's how it looked. And so, we formed up with the East Coast guys, and it was good. I mean, we did a long drive from way out west all the way, and made our various stops at the different stations with the guys. It was interesting to see Ramadi 2 years later. Place looked like it was just a regular town.
Crazy.
Yeah, it looked like Rosarito, Mexico. It was just like people were out and just like, I mean, we drove through during the day. I'm like, wow. I mean, it was definitely a culture shock.
Yeah, well, that is the model of counterinsurgency.
Yeah,
that was
points
is pointed to and called the model of counterinsurgency. And just was urban combat. Like there's so many awesome things that happen there. And the 228, the 11 AD, outstanding, and that you got to see that success.
Yeah, I mean it was brief, but it was remarkable. But marrying up with the guys, and it's like I knew a handful of the guys from the East Coast. A lot of it, actually, some of the guys I knew when I was in Puerto Rico as a boat guy that they had deployed down as newer guys, and so a lot of that stuff kind of comes full circle. But we had to do some I.E.D. walkthroughs, little TTPs were a little bit different. Helmets look different on guys, just different kit, East Coast, West Coast gear. It's kind of funny. What you did was a shakeout patrol. You know, you had to basically shake out gear and shake out just normal, you know, tails up, head counts, stuff like that. So, but I mean, it was great. It was great to like really open that up, because then now we're working, you know, the infamous Sadr City and, you know, the wall down, I think it was Route Gold or Copper, and being part of that, you know, I mean, another significant, you know, unexpected combat deployment to Iraq.
Yeah, I was talking to Stoner. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and he was telling me what was going on and everything. And I forget the way he put it, but he was just like, basically calling the fighters in Sadr City, like the fighters in Ramadi were, you know, like the enemy fighters in Ramadi were like good and clever. And he's like, these guys in Sadr City are like brave, and they are coming. And they might not be as clever, but they're freaking less like crazier.
Yeah.
And and you guys went in there and really, really put down the sword. And the whole thing was like 6 weeks long. And it was what happened. They basically, the sheikhs that were in there, the hoodlums and the sheikhs and the Mahdi militia leadership, like they had been just wantonly killing Americans for 5 years at this point, and really doing it sort of uncontested, because Sadr City was off limits for all practical purposes. It was off limits. And so now American forces went in there, they're trying to build this, and they're still getting away with a lot. And then you guys roll in there with that Defender and kill a ton of Mouj fighters. And they came to the table and said, let's work something out.
Yeah, and then we stayed for another 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
You know, didn't have to go back into the city. We're just going back into surrounding cities. But, yeah.
This is, you know, again, you get tagged your way out there in the West. This is once again, you're stepping up into a situation where the outcome is not known, but we can start running some numbers and start running the odds. How do you feel about going in with that Defender?
When we got that call, or we had that meeting, I had a message and email from my wife that day, and so I called her, and she was pregnant. I'm like, yep. Yeah. So this, you know, that same day, I'm like, well, then this might be it. Then there's at least my legacy will at least continue. So, yeah, there's that, you know, bit of acceptance that, okay, you know, I mean, this is how things are lining up, and this is the messaging. So, but yeah, so go back out there, and like I said, it's like we formed back up, and, you know, new faces, new names, you know, but it was great. I mean, in you know, in retrospect, it was, I mean, I got to do more demo than I know how to do with, you know.
What demo were you doing?
Loopholes.
Oh, just getting your loophole
Oh,
charts
yeah.
on.
Yeah, and really figuring out like the best way the science behind it. And I was showing breachers and snipers how to do it, so it could basically not have to set up 8 or 10 charges myself, you know. But it was great, man. I mean, it was like there was, we were in it, and we were living in like, we were at the zoo, Saddam Hussein's zoo is the building we were living in. It's like open bay, but dudes didn't care. You know, we were part of it. So we got picked, and we got picked because of our cell responsibility, our sole responsibility in the platoon, and because we were trusted and we were experienced. And so it was this varsity super platoon that was put together, and we were just, man, I think we were all just stoked to be there and not out west. So, you know, here we were expecting, you know, gym, tan and eat, you know, kind of deployment, you know. So,
coming home from that deployment.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good. Yeah, good. It was time to occupy the mind with something else. I wanted a break, and it wasn't that hard to sell that on the EOD commands. It's like, hey man, like, I'm tired. and I want a break. So I went over to the training command, the EOD training command, and I was running an air program, a jump program. So the EOD jump program had been really good for a few years, and then I basically bridged a gap with the East Coast Training Command that was running a free fall program. So we were running a free fall advanced course, basic like rope stuff for new EOD students, and then like some sustainment stuff like, static line and, boat drops and things like that. And so
did you get like hooked on free fall? Right. As soon as you did it, were you like, oh, hell yeah.
Well, I did it. And then I got back from our deployment in 2006. And so I started just doing it. And it was like, what was it? It was occupying me with, this, I had this loss, and it's like, this is just like, I'm driving on something. I'm just going to go. And it was great. So, I did that for a couple years, and it was really cool because
your son was obviously born when you got back.
Yeah, he was January 9th, 2009. Yeah. So we got that air program. NSW didn't have much, and so I started inviting the West Coast, SEAL platoons and working with their airloft, and like, do you guys, you have guys that want to come? And so I would start getting like a squad from Team 7, Team 3 guys came through. I'd even get SDV guys to come through. So we were basically doing this advanced 2-week, hey-ho jump profile in Arizona. And so I loved it. We're facilitating this advanced training for sustainment and currency. Whether or not, this side would ever use it as a real operational capability, didn't matter. NSW funded it. SOCOM looked at it as like, it's a viable program. So if we can get guys good enough, then perhaps at some day, somewhere they could at least, jump into a static kind of compliant, hey, we got to get these guys into this, AFSB or whatever it is, they've got to get them in, and we can't land a C-130, we can jump them in. So at least the proficiency was there. So that was my mindset. I was packaging this information that I had and just trying to basically build curriculum and get training out to the guys. So.
And how long did you do that job?
About 2.5 years.
And what was after that?
Then that was coming up on 2012, and I was going to basically get slated to go back over to Moby Unit 3, and they had changed the dynamics because I'd picked up E7. They had changed the dynamics of the structure of a EOD platoon. It was that if you were going to do an LCPO, you had to be a senior chief. So they wouldn't put me on an EOD team going back with any of the West Coast teams unless I was an E8, and I wasn't. So I'd done my master board. I was a master EOD tech at the time. And then a buddy of mine who was former East Coast was the training officer at TRADET. He's like, hey, man, you should come over here. And then the CMC at TRADET also knew him from all the jumping stuff because I got, worked with a lot of the East Coast guys. They pulled me over to TRADET, and then was working with a couple guys that I had deployed with in 2008 from Team 3, and then and I got assigned to assaults, and I was in the SOUC cell.
Just setting some I.E.Ds on people.
Yeah, and so there was a little bit of a disparity in that block where I looked at it as this is urban. The guys are finishing CQC and then now doing urban combat. Well, I'm assigned here. I'm gonna ramp this up, but I'm not gonna really test and evaluate the platoons, the SEALs. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull the 4 EOD guys that are assigned to them, and I'm gonna train them on how to train their SEALs, because it's better coming from them than coming from me. So that's then I basically built up like I.E.D. classes, practical, like on target stuff where they'd have to prosecute, a suicide vest or an I.E.D. at the doorstep, like these like full blown egress off of a houseborne I.E.D. So like these different things, working with the JTACs to be able to like drop on things. So their EOD guys would get schooled up from me, and then they would train their respective platoons. So that way that report, because I'm not going with them, they are. So I wanted them to look good. So I never did like anything that was like going to make the EOD guys look like shit in front of their platoon, right? Tried to, but so that was the mold that I tried to create with those guys at TRADET. And from what I understand, it's still really successful, and that model is still going.
Yeah, that's a great model.
Yeah.
2012, your daughter's born.
December 2012. Yeah.
So everything's kind of going like pretty awesome at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm busy. I'm busy and kind of trying to start to look a little bit forward, It's like, where am I going to surf next? Not so much that anymore, so
got mouths to feed.
Yeah.
Not
so
just
got some responsibility, but yeah, life seemed to be, life was kind of shaping up pretty good. And then, what I really noticed too, and was that, and it was kind of like, it was kind of contagious, in that cell with us at TradeEt, was that a few of us started having some like short-term memory loss stuff, because I mean, we were breaching, and the guys, because we wanted the guys doing heavy breaching, mechanical, manual, and explosive breaching. And then so nobody was doing any studies, but we kind of started throwing around, like, we understand as a breacher RSO, you're supposed to have a ballistic helmet. Or like, we started wearing bump helmets because of the venting. So like when the shockwave would go through, we wanted to vent out the top this is our own science, right? That we're looking at.
Bro science. Don't worry. Echo's got a PhD in bro science. So
yeah. I understand.
So make sure you wear eye protection and, yeah. But, so that was a little bit of a tough time. Sleep was kind of tough, at least for me personally. And, just kind of fatigued, but I was ready. I really loved it there. I loved it because it felt like being back on a platoon.
TradeEt was awesome.
TradeEt was like next to being on deployment, it was that cell was one of the coolest places I'd been stationed. I'd been assigned. And then it was awesome because then I had a conversation with one of the guys who was a platoon chief at Team 3. It just so happened to have been a new guy on my first deployment to Guam in 1999. And I was a platoon chief at Team 3. And he's like, hey, man, you want to go with us? Yeah. So I ended up doing an augment for about 4 months to Afghanistan with them in 2014, just as an E5.
An E5 chief.
Yeah. This is an E5. Took 2 bags and a weapons suite, and I was set.
How was that deployment?
It's fantastic.
What was going on?
So I first got paired up with Alpha Platoon, and then I moved out to Charlie Platoon, and it was it was something else to be in Afghanistan in January. Like my first look at it, but it was long overwatches. And I'm like, damn, this is my specialty.
Rural or urban?
Mostly rural, but there was some urban. We did end up getting into some urban situations, but it was really cool because I had a lot of friends that I'd worked with at TradeEt, and I knew through the air program I was running that to be in Afghanistan with, and a lot of snipers, a lot of big gunners, and so it was great to be part of that with those guys. And I got to, and as luck as it have it, I got to pull up a pressure switch I.E.D. and rip that out of the ground. Yeah. So that was unexpected because I really wasn't, because they had EOD guys, and it was like, that was not my role. My role was to help the assault force, to be part of the assault force, and then help, be a part of the EOD guys as well.
Talk me through this shit. So you're free, what? You're on patrol, and all of a sudden someone's like EOD up, or did you see it? What?
No. So there was so we were in vehicles. We were in vehicles coming back, and one of the Afghans had stepped on basically a pressure switch, and they got him out, and we were stuck. We were waiting for Dagger for at the time it was called something else, but for the route clearance to come and clear it. And I was like, hey dude, like, it's already blown up. Like, there might be a secondary, but let's check it out. And so went down, and it's like, okay, well, there's wire going to the blast hole. There's another wire there, and it's all at night. I'm like, yeah. And it's like, take out my my little non-metallic knife. It's like a ceramic knife, so there's no, you're not closing any contacts. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's good to go. Grabbed it. I'm like, hey, it's clear, man. And the guy's like, we're just gonna wait and just give it some time, but it was still, I was good because like that, it's like, wow, you and I can say this now, but it's at the time you're supposed to like turn that in, but it's like, it wasn't anything new. So what did I do? I brought it back with me, and I put it on target during full mission profile for TradeEt. Yeah. It's like, this is, and I talk through it, like not me grabbing it, but like, this is real. Like, this is like, here's how they're building them. This is what it looks like. So,
You get done with that. Mm-hmm. You keep working at Trade at. Is that where you close out your career?
Yeah. So that was 14. And then I was coming up to rotate out of Trade at, and I was talking with one of the EOD commands, and it was like, hey, there's a spot at Team 7, you know, on a EOD platoon to get paired up with Team 7. And like, I'm ready to go. And this time I've already been in 19 years. And they're like, we're going to put you on a different team.
Did you make senior chief?
Nope. Mm-mm. And so that was why. And so they're like, not going to put you on that team. Had a few discussions trying to get a little bit of leverage, and I said, okay. So I'll put in my retirement papers, and I got some calls from a couple master chiefs at training commands like, hey, will you come here? I said, no, I'm just now leaving a training command. I mean, yeah, I got a deployment out of it, but, you know, no. So I'm either going to go with one of the West Coast teams and do this again or not. I mean, like, you guys are, it's silly to not put me back there. I've got this experience. So, but it's okay. So I put in my papers, and my wife I asked her, like, well, where do you want to go? The Trade Ed had put me into a role as the assaults deputy, because the assaults deputy was a GS who had then transferred over to BUDS. And so they're like, hey, you've been here the longest. You can help doing logistics for ammo requests. And I was like, sure. You know, and so that was kind of cool until they hired a new GS there. And so I considered putting in for that. Yeah. To stay in San Diego. And it's like, I know this place. But she really wanted to go back to Florida. So it's like, okay. So I figured, well, let me get current back up on the jumping side, and we'll go to Florida, into this little town, you know, population 40,000 that's like the mecca for parachute manufacturing. So that's where we went, you know, little DeLand, Florida.
Did you have a plan, like specifically what you were going to do? Obviously you got your jumps back up, so you got your calls back up. Did you know some people?
I did. Yeah. So I reached out to 2 different companies in December of 2015 and said, hey, you know, like, I'm looking to come to DeLand, you know, this is, you know, here's my resume, et cetera, et cetera. And I had interviews at the same time while I was still on active duty. In February of 2016, interviews went great. They both made me an offer, and I went with the 1099 route. So I was working under an LLC as a contractor, teaching how to basically military units how to fly, you know, advanced parachute flight. So I did that for about a year.
Do you like it?
I loved it. Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, I learned a hell of a lot as far as like SOPs for, you know, advanced parachute flight for what the end users needed and what they were doing. And it was a great segue for me because, you know, I retire, I leave where I've been stationed forever with all the guys. I go to Florida and there's nobody there. But now I get to work these contracts and I still get to be around sort of like my guys. Yes. Yeah. Except I'm not putting on the body armor anymore, and I'm not part of the platoon anymore, but I'm still get to be around the guys. And that's like that personality.
Yeah. So. Because when I retired, you know, after 20 years in the teams, and something like 18 of those years. So Trade at, you know where the Trade at building was? Mm-hmm. Trade at SEAL Team 3, SEAL Team 1, all right there. And when I was also at SEAL Team 7. When I was at SEAL Team 7, it was in the building. It was in one of the BUDS buildings that's right next to Team 1.
Yeah.
So like my whole career was within a 300-yard radius.
Yeah, it was a big. It was a circle.
It was like a little circle, and then, you know, like, you clean out your locker, you put your stuff into your minivan, and drive off base, turn in your badge, leave. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Thank you for your service.
Listen, for me, I was in San Diego still, so I'm still going to, like, you know, hear and see the boys and whatnot. But you just straight... Now, look, it still is a very bizarre thing. It's a bizarre thing when you spend your whole adult life from freaking 18 until 38. That was me. Like, that's your whole development. Like, you're not even you don't even have your frontal lobe developed until you're 25. My frontal lobe was developed at SEAL Team 1. Mm-hmm. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And then that's just like boom, boom, boom. So when I left, it was definitely strange. I would say a huge piece that I had that was very lucky was I had jiu-jitsu. So I had friends that were into jiu-jitsu, which I had no friends that weren't jiu-jitsu, that weren't team guys. So I had team guys. If I wouldn't have had jiu-jitsu friends, I would have been not really having anybody to hang out with or do anything. But I had the gym, I had Victory, you know, coming in here every day. Guess what we're doing? We're sweating, we're working, we're getting after it. So and there's team guys, by the way, here at the gym.
Yep.
So it was all kind of, sure, there was a disruption because you pull out that one chunk of your life, but everything else kind of filled it in pretty quick. But you just straight uprooted to Florida.
Yeah. Yeah, it was July 2016. I went on terminal leave, July 2016, offloading the moving van at 10 o'clock in the morning in Florida. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell did I just do? Because it's like 82, feels like 820. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just like, you've got to be kidding me. Thankfully, you get used to it pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So I did that contracting bit for about a year. I did a couple other little side things with some friends, like taught some cops how to do a dive soup thing with their, like in Tampa. And then I got approached by actually a prior team guy, 1980, 1990s era team guy who was the president of a company.
Also like my era.
Yeah. And so he runs a company out there, and he asked me if I would consider interviewing for a research and development job, and I did. And then they brought me on, and I worked there for about 4 years, and I was doing research and development. What that looks like in the parachute manufacturing world is it's kind of like a very business resume way of saying I'm a crash test dummy for testing parachutes as a test jumper for that organization. And so we would do new projects wherever government solicitations would come up, and then we would respond to it, and then I would work with the manufacturers in developing a new system for whatever the curtail the solicitation.
All right, what's the most wazoo dumbass thing that you did when you were doing that job?
Well, I'm still doing that job though.
What's the most wazoo dumbass thing that you do? Let me ask you this: Do you ever test a reserve parachute with a third parachute?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not all that often, because there's
Do you put it on a belly band or something?
You hook it up to chest rings, and so it's all right here. Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean it's not that sketchy at all. But and then so I left that company in August of 21, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. Started my own LLC, just like everybody's supposed to do or does. Mm-hmm. And then I got a call from one of the manufacturers that I've been working with, and they asked me to come on. So I've been with them for coming up on 3 years. So, and I do kind of the same thing, but I'm at the manufacturer. So I'm in the engineering shop with the project leads that are, on the AutoCAD and on the computer designing parachutes and making things to it. But being a test jumper nowadays is not like, I hope it's going to work. It's going to work. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of how well it's going to work or what are some of the problems with it. So
nothing too sketchy. How many cutaways do you have right now?
Oh, maybe like 30 or 40.
How often do you cut away purposefully because you want to test something else?
Not that often. Yeah, not that. It's like if we're going to test something like that, it's going to be really meticulous, and it would be like a whole team kind of gets involved. So a team of about 4 or 5 people get involved as far as like making sure all the checks and balances are done. So it is a really thorough process, and they say that if there, at any point you're not comfortable doing this, you do not have to do it. So this is like you can volunteer yourself off of it really quick. So, but I get a lot of experience with a lot of exposure with military units, and that's where I get to kind of keep my sanity a little bit, is that I still get to be around the guys. And that's great. Like I said, I know that I've aged out. I'm not part of the assault force right anymore. And that's okay. Now my role now is a lot real similar to when I was an EOD guy on the assault force. Was I'm here to basically serve, something a little bit bigger than myself. I'm here to basically help make equipment, develop equipment that's safe and effective, so that way these guys can use it to go, say, rescue an American hostage someday. So that's my service has been continued by that, and that's how I frame what I'm doing for a living. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a lot of fun, and I love it, and I enjoy it. And the way I looked at it was when I was getting ready to retire, this 20-year span, I go back to what that senior chief had told me, was like, hey, you're going to have this really big resume of all this experience. And so I looked at it and it's like, yes, I got to do all these great things. I have all these qualifications and these different experiences. Instead of trying to recreate this, I'm just going to pick what I liked the most. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to do that. And so far it's been about 8 years riding that one out. So,
damn. Mm-hmm. Now, at some point, and I forget exactly when it was, you went through like a pretty rough patch I know you went through a rough patch as far as like marriage goes. Mm-hmm. What was going on there?
So, when, post 2006, with Mark dying. I mean, I was standing right next to him. And so I processed like, you know, why me? Like, why not? Like, why him? Why not me? And then because I just kept working and just doing so many different things throughout the rest of my time in, that I never really stopped to reflect. I could get pissed and just be angry. That was no problem. I could be abrasive. That was a really easy emotion to act on. But when things finally shut down and it was silent around me, then that's when like the darkness started to creep in. So we got to Florida in the summer of 2016, and I was just struggling with not a whole lot of self-compassion. Like I'm not supposed to be here, you know? And so when I met Christy and we got married and things were great, and I was, you know, came back from that deployment in 2006, she was everything. She solved everything because, I mean, and you know what it was like, or even what it is like. It's like, I'm having a bad day, and just the smile, just the words, just the empathy, just the compassion took it all away. So now that I'm going through this stuff, she's not able, I'm not letting her basically take that away. And so I built up some resentment toward her, and then through no fault of her own, just all through mine. And then in November of 2017, I had come back from a work trip, and I left her. And so we split in December of 2017, and it rocked the kids. And it's something that, I can never do that again. I never see my kid's face when I told them that I was leaving. And so I left, and I just continued to work, and I was just working and doing as much I could. I stayed close.
Is there yelling and screaming? Is there like, or are you just full freaking no emotion mode?
No, there's no, I mean, it was never explosive. And thankfully I never crawled into a bottle. You know, it never turned into that. It was never, there was no yelling and screaming and fighting like that. It was just, I was done. So I went and got some,
and in your mind, again, I'm trying to think of this from someone that's listening to us right now that maybe could be able to go, oh, I feel that too. In your mind, you're just thinking, this is a dead end, or like,
I didn't like who I had become. And it's like, I had this life that I was going through, and then it was it was upended, and I don't know how to take responsibility for it. I don't know if I just don't like who I am. I don't like who I've become. What I've created is good. You know, I have family, and we're financially fine. I'm doing what you're supposed to do as a man of the household, is support and protect. But it wasn't, there was nothing I did that was going to be fulfilling. Where I could sit there and say, well, if I just do this, then this will happen. It was just done. I was done. And if something had happened to where, I had died, like, no problem. Totally good with it.
I remember hearing, that you split up, and I was just like, I was so surprised, and like looking back, you know, to be like, hey dude, like if I'd have reached out and been like, at least, cause I didn't, of course, the loser over here, but like, hey man, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Cause it was very shocking, cause whenever I was around you two, it was like, kind of like a little fairy tale scenario. I mean, that's what it always, this was like fairy tale just turned into a straight fairy tale from my perspective, turned into like nightmare.
You know, what's funny is that she would have probably said the exact same thing, that it was just fairy tale. And then all of a sudden I came home, and she asked me, she said, hey, I just want to check in to see how things are going, like with us. And I looked at her and I said, I'm leaving you. And then her whole world crumbled. She had no idea. So, cause I just kept it in. I just wasn't talking. Because I didn't trust myself to have any conversations. I didn't want to, and I just wanted to go off and figure it out on my own, you know. And then about a year and a half later, I went and got some help, worked through some things. And then about 6-7 months later, so December of 2019, she's always a University of Florida Gator fan. So I bought her, was taking her and the kids to a UF Gator game. And we made a little stop, and I'd bought her a newer Ford Explorer because she loved Ford Explorers, and hers was falling apart, and she was just like, "What the hell is going on?" So that was like me tapping into like when we first met, because it was the kind of the romantic things that I did when we first met, right? That I hadn't been motivated to do, and so a couple months later we got back together. So we've been back together since February 2020.
Oh, so you're back in the game.
Oh yeah, it's been a great 4 years. Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah. And what's funny was that I looked at other couples that had that family, together, what I could see on the surface. I mean, it was inspirational. It's like, man, I want that. I want that. And I had that, but I didn't know how to face all of this darkness. And I finally learned how to have some self-compassion and forgive myself for being so resentful and just dark, And so, kind of came around, and it's been a great, I don't feel like I'm a building under construction with scaffolding around it so much anymore. I'm not exactly a finished piece of art or anything, but it's always, I accept that it's always a work in progress, but I'm not closed for repairs anymore.
You've been doing some writing, and I was looking at your Instagram. I'm going to read some of this.
Okay.
I look at my hands and think, fuck, what these hands have been through is beyond measure. The things they've done, the things they've seen, they're old, they're scarred. My hands have provided for me and others. They are witness to everything I've seen and done, the good and the horrific. They've been there for my birth. They've held others' hands in times of despair. They've brought people together and ripped them apart. My hands have been clenched fists in the face of victory and defeat. They've played rock, paper, scissors and thumb wrestled with a child. They've saved my life and also nearly killed me countless times. These hands have been above the earth and below the ground, in the dirt, snow, water, fire, in the wind and through the clouds. These hands have been covered in blood. They've saved life and taken life. They've held death. They've given life. They've prevented pain and caused pain. These hands have destroyed lives and healed others. They have shaken violently from fear and anger. They've applauded and fist bumped friends and strangers. They've dragged dead bodies in the street and pushed friends across the finish line. They've embraced with love and pushed away with fear. They've made things happen and not happen. They've shaken other hands in greeting after making deals and also ending friendships. They've waved hello for the first time and waved goodbye for the last time. They've saluted people, flags, and the coffins of my friends. These hands have pulled triggers, grenade pins, and smashed people's faces in. My hands are destroyers and healers. The same hands that have nourished a baby and provided life. These hands are worn and ragged. They are tired and sore. They've held her face as she looked into my heart. These hands have felt the beating heart of someone they loved and felt the final heartbeat of someone they loved. They lift, they pull, they drag, they throw, they struggle. They've been through heartbreak and triumph. They try to nurture my heart when they hold my face and catch my tears. I look at my hands and I can see everything. These hands are the truest part of me. They are the worst of me and the best of me. They hold my story. I feel like obviously I've written a bunch, and I feel like it's very helpful. And I realized it kind of going through losing guys, right? Because I oftentimes ended up being the guy giving, some kind of a eulogy, some kind of speech, memorial services. And I got into the mode where when someone died, I would just start writing because I knew what was coming. But what I realized is it kind of made me feel better. And when Stoner died, it was like probably 3 or 4 months later. And my son, who was really close to Seth, and he was probably like 14 or something at the time. And he's not like, he's a tough kid. And he came home from school one day, and he doesn't complain about anything, like especially to me, because he's not getting any any sympathy from me. So he's never going to be like, oh, I need this or I need that. But he said, when I'm in school, I'm having trouble working because I keep thinking about Seth. And I could see like he was sad, right? Because dude, Seth took him. When I wasn't around, he was like, I would love to say Seth was like an uncle to him, but he was more like a brother because Seth was kind of like a 14-year-old himself in many ways. So they were more like bros than they were some sort of older brother or situation or uncle situation. But he was, so my son was clearly, this was bothering him, of course. And I said, hey, all right, this is what I want you to do. Write a letter to Seth's mom and explain to her why you miss Seth and what he meant to you. And he did it. And he never talked to me about it again, in a negative way. And I've always told people, like, that's one of the things that I think is very beneficial is it's a way to detach from your emotions, right? Because you write the words down, you have to process what you're thinking, and then you see them on the page. You think that's been helpful to you?
Oh, and it's like, yeah, that's great advice to have given him for sure. But writing has, and it snuck up on me. I've always been, I try to be very grammatically correct because I like that style of writing. And it's like when I went to school, I was really, I learned a lot about, at least proper writing and the best I can. I'm still, a caveman, look at the fire I've created. But I really do love writing. And because I always try to keep it in, in the first person and with me as the main sort of antagonist of like both the protagonist, both roles, because it is about me, and it's a way for me to be able to keep in touch with my emotions. Because while I can sit there and I can't, if I'm not, communicating anything, it's one thing when you're having a conversation with somebody and you are basically going to get some type of response. This way, no one's responding. And it's just me. And it's funny because I'll write and then I'll go, oh, there needs to be a comma there. But it's not like anybody's going to read it, but it's just for me to actually get it out. And sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's a dream or an interpretation of it. It's just anything, but it is getting it out there. And I was working with this coach a couple of years ago, and I just lost a buddy of mine. This is back in 2021. And she was saying, she's like, you guys are, you're so similar in so many ways. You don't play checkers, you play chess, and with your words. You're like, I'm going to ask you something like, how do you feel? And then you're like, oh, well, this. And she goes, stop, feel. And we're like doing this on Zoom. And she's like, just feel. And then she goes, well, how do you feel? And then I would respond and she'd say, stop. She goes, it's a trick question. You're not supposed to respond. You're supposed to sit there and just feel. You don't put words to it. There shouldn't be. An emotion is an emotion. We have created words on how to describe how we feel. I just want you to sit there and feel. And so I do that, and then I write. So I sit there and I just don't even, like, whether I'm, sad, struggling, happy, whatever it is, I'll just sit there and then just go to work. And then I'll put it to paper. And I very rarely do I ever change anything. It's almost always the same. Sometimes I'll write about Mark. Sometimes I'll write about me. Sometimes I'll write about the kids. Sometimes I'll write about, God and spirituality and whatever it is, and philosophy and anything and just nothing. Sometimes it's just free association. I'll just go. And that's it. I can do it at any time because I'll do it on my phone. I don't care. It's not pen to paper, but it's like I will just go. My wife and I, we were driving like up to northern Florida. This is like a year ago. And we're getting off the freeway. And I said, hey, can you take over driving? And she's like, you okay? I said, yeah, I just need to write. Like I got something and I don't want it to leave. And she's like, sure. And so I didn't, even we were 20 minutes from it, but I didn't want to lose it. It meant so much to me. And it was just like, just go. And so I really think it's a really good form of self-therapy because sometimes you like what you write and sometimes you don't. So can you really be your own worst critic? I mean, because we usually are, but nobody's going to see this. Mm-hmm. No, there's no judgment, no pressure, no expectations. Just do it. And that's the work that I put in because it's a choice.
Did someone advise you to do that, or did you figure it out?
She did, the coach I was working with, but I didn't start writing until.
You say coach, what is it? So
I was doing basically some work with guys with Nick Norris, and he was working with basically some coaches for guys post service.
Got it.
Just basically some talk therapy stuff, and it's like she's not a therapist. It's a coach, so it's not all the state rules that go with it. So we just worked with her for about 4 sessions, and we're just chatting, getting to know each other, and she had recommended it, and I'm like, yeah, okay, writing, cool, whatever, sure. But between work, the gym, seeing my kids, seeing the world through my kids' eyes, and writing, like life is pretty good right now, and I really like it. So I don't have a 5-year plan. But I did stop surfing, so I chilled out on that, so that's good. So
wait, why is it good that you stopped surfing? Because you went to Florida?
Yeah, well, I went to Florida, yeah.
Aren't you, what are you, 40 minutes from the coast?
Like 20.
Oh, okay.
But it's also New Smyrna Beach is like the shark bite capital of the world. So I'm good. Yeah. Because if you get attacked by a shark off this is the way my brain works, right? If I get attacked by a shark off the coast of San Clemente Island while I'm surfing out there on a work trip, probably not going to make it. Mm-hmm. If I get bit by a shark in Florida, I'm going to be out of work for like 8 months. I'm not going to die. So it's like, this is how it works for me. So, and it's really not worth it. I mean, very rarely does the surf really get Southern California quality. So, but
you also, that's awesome that you're like in a good spot, and you kind of had to be because you did that, the 7 skydives in 7 continents in 7 days.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was approached in June, July of 2021 about this concept, and I was asked if I could be sort of like the expedition lead on basically helping plan all of these different locations. My response was, man, you're biting off a lot. Like that's a very huge puzzle enigma to try to piece together, especially all 7 continents in 7 days. But what did this do? This gave me a purpose, because I mean, that's what it is, man. I mean, for us men that we get to an age, it's like, what are we looking for? I just want to be valued. I don't need to be like loved and adored. I want to be valued and respected. And you give me a mission and I'll do anything to get there. And so this was that opportunity. And it's like, I get to be around some other like-minded individuals, prior military guys. And so we started planning, 18-month planning cycle for it, a couple training camps, and we were looking for a nonprofit to support because we had support from sponsors like Black Rifle, Coffee Company, Andy Stump's podcast, and then we had some other ancillary sponsors, but we wanted to support it for a nonprofit. And I'd done some work with Folds of Honor, just kind of here and there, doing some jump stuff with them over the years. And so I approached Larry, who kind of runs a lot of the fundraising for it. And we got in some discussions, and then we all agreed to support with Folds. And what I loved about Folds was that, they're not biased. You don't have to have been, a Green Beret, an EOD guy, a Navy SEAL. Like, we support whoever, and they're what they do is they do education scholarships for deceased service members or disabled veterans for their dependents, kids, wives. So they do private education scholarships for private school or college or things like that. So that to us seemed like it made the most sense, because we had a Ranger, couple team guys, Ranger Regiment guy, or Ranger Marine Scout Sniper. We had a JTF2 Canadian guy. So we wanted to really open it up to where it wasn't just going to be for one specific foundation. Yeah, and it went off pretty good. I mean, it was, like I said, it was something post-military that gave all of us something to like buy in and believe in.
It'd be kind of hard to go and eat a burger on 7 continents in 7 days.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
like just doing that alone would be pretty impressive.
No, it was hard. I mean, we spent a week in Antarctica, because when you go down to Antarctica, you have to stay there for a week.
Wait, why is that?
Because, I mean, it's a giant piece of ice on the planet, and planes don't just go in and out of there all the time. So we flew there, and I think it's a 737 that we flew in from Punta Arenas, Chile, that flies about a 4.5 hour flight down to Union Glacier, and it's a 2-mile long ice runway. So when it was really cool. So when you land in a plane, you know, the plane lands on any normal runway, it hits its brakes. Well, this one doesn't. It has to power down and slow down because it's ice.
Did you say 2 miles?
Yeah, it's this 2-mile stretch of runway.
Damn,
it's crazy. So the guys that work, it's called ALE, Antarctica Logistics and Expeditions, the company, one of the companies that runs Union Glacier Camp. I mean, they do all sorts of stuff. Like in this December, they'll have the Antarctica Marathon. Expedition teams will go down there to do expeditions down to the South Pole, cross-country skiing, you know, and there's like penguin, you know, excursions, stuff like that. But it's really a lot of really cool people that run that camp down there. So Mike McDowell, Tim McDowell, and then the rest of their team. It's pretty awesome. So
then you hit that, and then it was just like,
yeah, so our clock started.
Airplanes.
Yeah, so the clock started. I think it was on January 9th. We did our jump into Antarctica. An hour and a half later, we're on the 737 flying to Chile. So we get to Chile, do the jump in Santiago, 2 continents down in like 14 hours.
Oh, that's legit.
Fly to Miami, getting ready to execute the North America continent. FAA NOTAM system goes down. So all commercial travel is shut down. Hadn't been shut down since September 11th. 2001. Damn. So like we're flying commercial. What are we going to do here? So it was cool. It was a really good example of why we put the kind of team together. We didn't put the team together because they were the best jumpers in the world. Some guys had, you know, less than 200 jumps. We put the team together because they're so resourceful. And so guys just went to work. Mm-hmm. And so got funding, got some support. We ended up, chartering a plane from Miami Executive to Barcelona.
Damn.
So
that's expensive.
Yeah,
activity right there.
Yeah. So that part I was like, just as long as we get, I worked the Barcelona piece, not getting the Barcelona piece. So we got to Barcelona. We spent about 5.5 hours on the Europe continent, jumped there, and then bounced down to Cairo, jumped over the pyramids, and then from the pyramids, from Cairo to UAE, jumped in Abu Dhabi, and then bounced down to Perth and did the last skydive in Perth. I think we did it in 6 days, 6 hours.
Got it done.
Yeah. And then the documentary was released in May. There were some screeners like in New York, Tampa, LA, a couple in Texas, and then they were doing some stuff in Colorado. So I'm not sure if it's going to get put on a streaming service or anything, but a lot of the information, so that's how it's going. But we did really good. We raised a lot of money for Folds, did some Fox News bits and things like that.
Awesome.
And so yeah, it's been a really cool experience and journey for that, you know, and that's where it was like, that gave me something really to occupy myself for about 24 months to like mission oriented, you know, all the while doing, you know, full-time gigs. But that's where I've seen a lot of the guys that I'm still around, that, you know, prior team guys especially, be successful at home because they've been able to find some value. So a good friend of mine is a prior East Coast guy. His name is Greg Andrews. He lives in Tucson and does we do a lot of work together. And he came out to San Diego to get MERT treatment, that magnetic EEG treatment.
Okay.
You know what MERT is?
Yeah. It's like magnets around your head, right?
Yeah. And so it's like I think it was like a 7 or 12 week program he did. And he saw a huge boost in his anxiety gone. It's a lot of PTSD treatment, TBI treatment. And so he started his own in Tucson. And it's called Brainwave Now, and so he's working that hard, and he's trying to, you know, marry up with nonprofits. But what my point is that when guys get out and they find a purpose that's serving others instead of just like, what about me? That is going to be what's going to be the service part. Like that's what's going to make you feel full of gratitude. Yeah. Is that, serving others. And that's a kind of the adage is that, continuing to serve those who served. And that's what I'm just trying to do.
Yeah. I think that's, you were talking about Debbie Lee earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that's just for her to just go into full service and support mode.
Yeah.
And, starting from the very first phone call from the Tactical Operations Center that Leif made to her, and the first thing out of her mouth was like, how are you guys doing? And it was crazy. And she stayed in that mode the whole time with America's Mighty Warriors.
Yeah.
Just doing the hyperbolic chambers. Have you done that yet?
No, it's hard to get
it's a long
to
time.
get 12 weeks to it.
We have mutual friends that have done it, and it has changed their lives.
Wow.
Changed their lives. And I'm trying to get some of them to come on here, but not everyone wants to go on a podcast, so it's understandable. But their lives have been changed, drastically changed.
Wow.
So that's awesome, and I think that's what she's focused on, right?
Yeah.
She needed a new mission, and she found it with America's Mighty Warriors. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so what are you up to? So what's going on right now? What's the current Nick Kush getting after?
Well, I'm doing, so I'm in between contracts right now. So I just basically will be, contract through my own LLC and just do, I kind of call it advising as opposed to instructing, but sometimes I'll play a military free fall instructor role, and coaching and things like that. So, I've been extremely grateful, for a lot of the way the path is shaped up, right? Cause these guys will contact me and sole source me directly. So it's incredibly, it's humbling, to still be a part of the community to a certain degree, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm doing, and then as well as working for a manufacturing company that it's called Performance Designs, located in DeLand, and they've been around 40 plus years making parachutes. And so I test jump parachutes for their project leads and their engineers, and we basically try to put forth end products for military clients. It's awesome.
And the kids are rocking and rolling.
Kids are crushing it. Jackson's 15. He's taller than my wife, and he picked up golf again. He's going to try out for the high school golf team. He's playing the trombone for the marching band. My daughter is 11, and Jocelyn is crushing it with art and soccer. And they're getting ready to go back to school, so she's not stoked because she's going to middle school. So, But and then I do a lot of trips to Europe, working with clients out there, and so I'm going to take Jackson next year when I go to Norway and get him packing parachutes and doing, helping out. So
how many jumps you got right now?
A little over 13,000.
Damn, dude. Damn, that's
we're going to take Echo for a tandem skydiving.
Yeah, let's roll.
Does that get us up to speed? We there? We're good?
Yeah.
Freaking and where can people find you?
Like my extensive Instagram, I think, is Nick Kush 237.
What's 237?
It's an old. Not a lot of people know this. It's kind of funny. So the movie The Shining. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there was
Room 237.
Yeah, there was a documentary that was called Room 237, and it's about the room that Jack Nicholson's character it basically wasn't supposed to go in. He goes in, and then he goes in, and all of the great things that he thinks, like the materialistic and wonderful things that he thinks that he wants in life, all of a sudden turns to the worst and darkest things in life. So to me, I resonated with it because of the shit that I was going through. It's like, okay, here's this contrast, and I'm always looking externally, and then finally to be able to turn internally, and then that's where I can start to forgive myself, still show myself some self-compassion, and grow from that. So it's always kind of a reminder,
There you go, dude. I just got the nugget
Layers
there.
right there.
Layers. Mm-hmm. And then, how do you say D-land? Because I got it in my head. So I was looking at your stuff, and I was like, oh, D-land, high performance, D-land HP. And I thought it was like you were saying, hey, it's skydiving, so we're like D-land, like getting away from the land, like we're going to decouple from this thing. I thought it was like a play on words, like D-land, we're going to get away from land. But that's actually just the place.
With you saying that, it might actually stick with everyone that lives in DeLand, Florida.
DeLand.
So it used to be called Persimmon, I think is what it used to be called, and Henry DeLand, and whatever, in the early 1900s had basically then sort of conquested the area and made it into like the citrus, orange grove place. And so Henry DeLand, long hair, long beard, and now it's DeLand. And in the 90s, they used to call it Dead Land because nobody was there.
But it's skydiving mecca for.
Well, it's funny because like when I went, that's what I thought. And I mean, and it is, it's like this like manufacturing epicenter. It's like where all these guys in the 70s and 80s just landed was to do it here. But what I'd say it really is closer to, it's a middle of America. It's Florida, but it's home to Stetson University, which is the Stetson Hatters, and it's a baseball college. It's like they've had like 3 or 4 pitchers that go to the pros out of there, but yeah, pretty simple town, and it's cool. It's a nice little old town, and kids love it. And I mean, if you can get used to the heat, it's okay. But
and mosquitoes,
they're not that bad.
Are they not?
No, they're not that bad.
Dude, I remember when I was a kid, I was going to Florida. It was like
some parts of Florida.
And I'm talking, coming down from Maine, which they say, I'm sure they say this in a lot of states, but they say like the mosquito is the Maine state bird. Yeah, because they're freaking gnarly.
I mean, like we put a pool in, and I did put the big giant screen around it. It's funny because I'll post pictures, and people are like, "Hey, man, so like, do you have to clean that glass?" No, man, it's a screen. If it were glass, it'd be a greenhouse. Yeah.
Right on. So you can be found at. You can get this shirt that you're wearing.
Oh yeah, so
Skydive Mars.
Yeah, so this was kind of a play on on
Elon's
things. Yeah, Elon's Occupy Mars, and then the guys at Black Rifle did a thing called Caffeinate Mars, and I said, well, I want to Skydive Mars. So with Johnny Kim and I being so close, I said put a good word in for me. So he's got a T-shirt. So if he can get us to Mars, I want to jump into Mars.
And people can get those T-shirts at DeLand.
Yeah,
DeLandHP.com.
DeLandHP.com.
And that's where it's at.
That's where it's at.
Right on. Echo Charles, you got any questions?
Yeah, I got some questions.
Okay, cool.
All right, actually, you mentioned Greg Andrews.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is the same Greg Andrews I know. Tall, handsome dude.
Yeah.
Okay. You know his nickname is Mr. Wonderful. Did you know that?
I feel like I did know that. How did you know him?
He was one of the first guys I met when I was in San Diego, through my friends.
No kidding.
Yeah. So we were pretty close actually for a long time. I mean, he moved away and stuff. But
all right. Well, I hope it's the same guy.
Yeah, I think so. But,
he's a prior East Coast guy.
Was he here for a while, like in 2001?
Oh, he might have been. That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
he might have been. I'm not sure his career because I only met him about 2012.
Oh yeah. So. Actually, I think he did go to the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
right on.
Yeah. Good guy.
Go back to EOD days. So what's a loophole charge?
Oh, I forgot. This is like where Echo rounds off.
The thing.
The corners.
So a lot of people just press stop and they're carrying on with their day right now. But there's a couple people that are listening, dude.
or they fast forward to this part.
No, he gets some love, dude. Whenever I make little snide comments like that, first of all, there's people that just think I'm like a mean person because I hassle Echo. But then there'll all be people like, no, we're still listening. We're still listening. We like hearing Echo's concepts and questions. So
I think it's good though because it's like you get to talking to someone like me, and it's like we just gloss over acronyms. So he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna write that one down for clarification."
Gotta understand. Yeah.
So a loophole.
Do you know that he asked Admiral McRaven?
Oh man,
he goes, "Do you have to be in the Navy to be an admiral?" and God bless Admiral McRaven. I was like trying to hold. I was like embarrassed. I was gonna smack him. I was gonna, but I'm like, and Admiral McRaven like a pro. He's like, well, yeah, Echo, yep. I guess you could be in the Coast Guard, but generally speaking, you do have to be in the Navy to be an admiral.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what you were thinking, to be honest with you.
Well, first off, I didn't know that. Some people in the world don't know that. Yeah, I'm one of those. I was.
Bro, by the way, this was like 400 podcasts deep. This is after we've had multiple admirals on here, but it's all good. It's all good, bro.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
So loophole charge is basically, so if I've got a wall,
thank you for that.
I've got a wall and I want to be able to basically put a hole, say this big through it, and I will assess what's it made out of. Is it mud? Is it concrete? Is it reinforced? And that will determine how much of a charge I put in, because the idea is I'm trying to get a hole that looks like, damage from the outside so I can see out. So snipers can actually see through them. So I'm basically blowing a loophole that looks about that big. Sniper would have standoff so you can't see on the outside that there's a gun in that hole.
Right. Okay. All right. And one thing I'm just going off, you mentioned, or you said the expression, take a knee, right? Is there anything behind that besides the normal take a knee? Because you almost like you said it like it was like part of some real official, like
Well,
procedure or something.
if you see an EOD guy take a knee,
Right.
he's either tying a shoe, tired, or he's working on something that you don't want to be anywhere near of.
Okay.
Anywhere near. So that's what I was referring
So
to.
it is kind of
lesson.
like a thing, though.
Yeah, and I would tell guys, if you see me take a knee, just give a few steps, because what I would this is going through when I was especially at Trade at working that EOD portion at Trade at, was that it was so important that you guys got so proficient at training your guys, because when you go to work on something, just for the love of God, make sure that you don't get someone else killed because of your decisions and your actions on. Like, that's your number one responsibility, is them, not you. Put them first.
Yeah, speaking of that, I was talking to Leif, and he knew you were coming on, and he was like, yeah, ask him about the time that I think him and someone else were like, hey, we need to breach this door. And you're like, hey, I got it.
Oh, yeah.
And he said they're like standing there, and you put a breach on the door, and then you go running past them.
Well, I mean, yes, but there was, because I came up and there was no room for me. It's like, well, if you guys want to be the closest, that's what's going to happen. I mean, yeah, I did just like to overemphasize the blast wave, propagating through everybody. It was like when Tony asked me to disable a car. I'm like, okay. He was surprised what 2 blocks of C4 did on the steering column, and so was the ISR. They were like, "What the hell was that?"
Didn't that do something to the roof of the
building? No, but it took the hood of the car, it blew it across the street, and I came back, and I was surprised that the car looked like a canoe. I was impressed. So Tony's like, "What the fuck?" He said to disable the vehicle.
Hey, Chief, vehicle's been disabled.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Okay, so me being the lay person, if you will. So you know how in the movies you got the bombs and they get real sophisticated, Is it like that? Like, don't clip the red wire.
I knew it was coming.
Come on, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I knew it was coming. No.
Okay.
But it can be. But you would, the guys that got really good at it, like I glossed over it a little bit, was like the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, back in the 70s, when they were really heavily in conflict. They would do a lot of trick fuckery with their wiring systems because they knew they were going up against British bomb techs. And so it would be like guys would have to study wiring, and it wasn't about a color. It was about where it was going and where it was going to end up. So, but yeah.
You've watched MacGyver?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
we're the same age, by the way. So
Yeah.
I assume that might sound like a crazy question to some people, but we're the same age. So there's this one. I forget the name of it, but it's like a real sophisticated bomb. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
Oh, it's too bad, Brad. Brad, it's too bad because I think you'd very much enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well,
Did he get it done?
He got it done. His friend. It's a long story, but his friend died because turns out there's more than one. It's a whole thing. That's why I think you'd enjoy it.
All right.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah. You too, man.
Good echo, Charles?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'll hit you up, if I have
for
any
sure.
more.
Yeah.
Of course,
MacGyver memes back and forth.
Come on, Brad.
Right on.
Yeah. Well, before we close out, at least for me, it's like I want to thank you for reaching out and having me on. I mean, it's like being part of like a lot of these things that I try to basically still, as opposed to just doing the contract things and working for myself, to be part of the community. Like we went to France. I think you reached out to me right before I went to France for the 80-year anniversary of D-Day. I think the further away I get from the service, from my service, I tend to appreciate it a little bit more. I think I miss it. There's times where it's like, man, I can't wait to get the hell out of here. But then when they're like, hey, clean your cage out, so and so needs it. You're like, so it kind of stings a bit. But finding that value within what I'm doing, with my life. And so I really appreciate what you guys are doing and what you've done, especially as of recently, with a lot of carrying on, not just stories that you were part of guys that you knew, but going back in time. And it's like you're cracking open this time capsule so people can actually be exposed to it. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that. So I really appreciate it. And it's a lot of people would talk about that, and that's when when your name comes up in some of my circles, it's that I didn't know this. When you do a lot of stuff with Patton and like the about face thing, that was one of your first starters. That really was seemed to be very influential. So I appreciate it. So thanks for having me out.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for joining us, bro. Appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your lessons learned, and obviously, thanks for your service to the Navy, to EOD, and to the teams. Most important, thanks for protecting my teammates, our brothers, from harm, and at great risk to your own life. Thanks for keeping them safe, and thanks for truly living today to honor the ones that we lost. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
And with that, Nick Kush has left the building. Another individual, another human being who stepped up over and over and over and over again and kept getting after it. So awesome to have him on here. Awesome to hear his perspective. And we talked for like an hour prior to, and then another hour, another hour after.
Yeah.
So we probably owe another recording of more things. But this is like when you doing the podcast like that with Nick is almost like writing down the outline of a story, right? So you kind of got the major moving pieces.
Yeah.
But dude, there's so many like details in there.
Yeah.
That could be expanded on and give color. Because he definitely experienced a lot of very dynamic things. I mean, you could write a chapter about, look, in Extreme Ownership, we wrote chapters about like one thing. Well, we did a lot of those things. Nick did a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So you could start getting his perspective on stuff. It'd be awesome. But anyways, awesome to have him on here. Yeah. So getting after it.
Yep.
He was getting after it. Speaking of getting after it.
Countdown. I was trying to remember something. The name of the MacGyver episode with the bombs called Countdown. Look into it.
I remember. What was MacGyver's background supposed to be?
His background was actually it was like science, math, like that kind of stuff. He never carried a gun. He was like he was a professional troubleshooter at first for the government. Then it kind of morphed into the secret like foundation called the Phoenix Foundation. And he would just go out to like certain places.
So much dumb stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Because it makes sense if he would have been an EOD guy.
Sure.
It would have made sense.
Right. Yeah, if he had an EOD background.
Yeah, if he had an EOD, he was Navy. Oh, this guy was Navy EOD. Kind of like Thomas Magnum.
Magnum PI?
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
You know what his background was, right?
Navy SEAL all day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And TC.
TC.
He's a Seawolf pilot. I'm pretty sure he was a Seawolf pilot.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I don't know I think the other dude was supposed to be Special Force. Rick. I think he was supposed to be Special Forces.
Yeah.
Jack Carr. We need to consult with Jack Carr because Jack Carr knows what's up with Magnum.
Well, Magnum PI, that was when I was really young because that's a Hawaii show too. And then they did a remake that I tried to get into, kind of, whatever. But I feel like how when they do remakes, they change certain things, like kind of big things. They have different takes. Like the Higgins is now a girl, and then there's all these different changes. Where it kind of throws you off, especially if you really like the old one, it just throws you off, so it just won't feel the same. But it was pretty good. But anyway, yes, I dig it. Either way, Magnum PI, hell yeah, all day. Background, fit, suited him. Private investigator now with kind of overqualified, right? Yeah. So yeah, MacGyver. Yeah.
But you know how Jack Carr, he'll post like clips from Magnum PI. And when you're watching them when you're a kid, they're just kind of like entertainment or whatever, but Jack kind of fires them up a bit. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I am with him.
He's like, he's got one, he wrote one. It was like, I think Magnum PI shoots somebody. And he explains that this is one of the first, direct gun violence in a TV show in history.
Oh, damn.
Because you remember in the old days, hey, if a man and a woman were in bed, they had to have their feet on the floor. You ever hear that standard?
No.
So in the old days, maybe it was the 50s or something, if a man and a woman were in bed, in order to make it, proper and not offensive.
Not overly sexual.
Yeah, not overly sexual. They had to have their feet on the ground.
Oh, for real?
So you'd see these scenes where there's like a foot on the ground, but they're kind of in bed. But yeah, I forget what it was, but yeah, Jack Carr, he knows a lot about that kind of sort of, he's so into the, I don't know what the name of that genre is. What's the name of the genre? Tom Clancy and all that.
Oh, I don't know, bro.
And it's what Terminal List is. It's a genre.
Oh, for real?
It's like military adjacent thrillers or something like that.
Yeah.
But he read all those things growing up.
Yeah, it makes sense to know that kind of stuff. But yeah,
so
not
go. Me. I wasn't reading books growing up.
No.
Jack Carr was reading books. I was not. I was an idiot. Good times.
Was? Okay.
Yeah, I am an idiot. Check. Well, I do read books, and I've read a ton of books now, but I didn't have that. I didn't have that gene, really.
Yeah.
You know, the book reading gene. I had the rock throwing gene. I had the stick, throwing gene.
We'll just say you were a late bloomer. Let's say the genes were expressed a little late in life, and that's good. That's actually worked out great for all of us. So thank you for that. Speaking of things working out great for all of us.
Working out's great for all of us?
It
is.
Look
at you, dude. Look at you with your little foreshadowing. Good job, bro.
We call it a segue. Nonetheless, Jocko Fuel. Okay, this is what we're doing. Look.
Good seg.
We're working out. We're working out hard. Hopefully.
You asked me this morning why my eyes were red when I showed up here. I was like, well, I worked out.
Worked out hard.
Heard of it?
Yeah, I heard of it, bro. Shoot.
All right. We're going to need some fuel for that. Get Jocko Fuel. JockoFuel.com. Check it out. Also, you can go to JockoFuel.com. Also, we're going into Walmart. So, should be by about September. We're in Walmart getting after it. Check that out. Also, we got a thing to reward people that are, let's say, consistent customers in the game. There's like loyalty. I haven't thought of a cool name for it yet. We need some kind of a thing to call it.
Yeah.
We don't have that yet. But we got, if you go to jockofuel.com/rewards, we just put little discount sales in there. If you order some stuff, we can support you ordering stuff so you can support yourself. So that's what we're doing. Jocko Fuel. You guys know the deal. Protein. Hydrate. God, hydrate's good. God, the protein's good. That milk train. So get yourself some. It's called the Good Flavor. No artificial sweeteners. That's the same with everything that we make. So check it out, jockofuel.com. Also, we're at Wawa, Vitamin Shop, GNC, Military Commissaries, AFES, Hannaford, Dash Stores in Maryland, Wake Firm, ShopRite, HEB, Meyer. If you put an S on there, people are like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah, it's true.
So Meyer, Wegmans, Harris Teeter, Lifetime's Fitness, Shields, small gyms everywhere, jiu-jitsu gyms, CrossFit gyms. Email jfsales@jockofuel.com. By the way, we're the official sponsor of, speaking of jiu-jitsu, we're the official sponsor of Craig Jones Invitational, where the real sponsorship should be orthopedic surgeons replacing ACLs.
Yeah, no kidding.
Also, speaking of jiu-jitsu, you probably need rash guards for your jiu-jitsu. First of all, we hope you're training jiu-jitsu. You probably need a rash guard. You probably need a gi. Go to originusa.com. Get American-made goods. American-made jeans, American-made boots, American-made hoodies. Just get your American-made gear. That's what we're doing. Go to originusa.com and get yourself the clothes that you need for on and off the mats of justice. Bro, I did that radio call today.
Yeah.
We're coming in. Yeah, that sounded good, right?
It worked good.
Yeah,
Yes, it did.
You liked that, didn't you?
I did like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Still do.
Echo Charles, we need you at the front desk.
Yeah. Great work, 100%.
Yeah. I was gonna do something tactical, like we need fire support, but instead I sent you to the front desk right there.
Thank you for that.
Clean up in aisle 4. Echo Charles, clean up in aisle 4.
Yeah, I'm here to help. Whatever you need, bro. Anyway.
Well, we know that you push the envelope when it comes to carrying your groceries, so occasionally we're going to have a mishap.
I'm trying to do the best I can over here. Also, Jocko's store. It's called Jocko Store. JockoStore.com. That's where you can get your Discipline Equals Freedom shirts, hats, hoodies. We have socks coming soon. I know I said it before, but they're coming soon. They're coming.
Here I was over here with a regular pair of freaking tube socks.
Yeah, I know, Brad. You're the main guy who needs them. By the way,
how tall are our socks going to be?
2 sizes. Crew socks, I think they're called, the regular ones, right? and then the ones that go up to
Which one are you
almost to your
going
knee.
with? You going with the tube socks,
I'm going with both.
Socks, boy.
I'm going with both.
Representing.
I'm representing both. Hey, Brad, you're going to thank me when you go to the airport and you got to take off your shoes. Everyone's looking at your socks. And now you don't have to wear those freaking grandpa socks that you always wear. Now you can wear some cool stuff and people will be happy. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, you're welcome for that. Also,
dude, thank you so much.
Also, Shirt Locker, SHURT, like hurt, but Shirt Locker. That's a subscription scenario. You get a new shirt design every month.
People like them, by the way.
People do like them. That is true. It's a good observation, Jocko.
Do you like the fact that you kind of have a medium now to express yourself in the world, besides your video? Rare videos that you make occasionally.
Oh, you mean talking right now on this microphone? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm talking about your shirt locker.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to give you a compliment, bro.
Okay.
Sensitive?
Oh, you're trying to give me a compliment. You're sensitive? No, bro. I call it. I'm used to certain things. You know, the pattern interrupt. I wasn't ready for it. Thank you.
Today. What was I on you about today during the podcast?
No, bro.
With Nick Cushion here. What was it? I was harassing you about something. Some people get really don't like that. You got some protectors out there, bro.
Yeah, well, you know, it's my people. Oh yeah, the Admiral thing you're talking about. Yeah.
That one's hard, bro. It's hard for me to not bring that up and chuckle.
Did you always know that? Like when you were a kid before you joined the Navy, did you know the Admiral had to be a Navy guy or a Coast Guard?
Are you asking if I was born inherently with this information?
Exactly right.
Navy? No.
So at some point in your life.
But as a 42-year-old man that has sat through 350 military podcasts.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So the point is, and will always be, you're not born with information, just like leadership. You know what I'm saying? You're not just born with it. At some point, you got to learn this stuff. Okay? I know now.
You know what? Good. You learned.
There you go. See? Anyway, back to the Shirt Locker. New design every month. They're outside of the box a little bit, but they still do represent discipline equals freedom.
You should put on a t-shirt, do you have to be in the Navy to be an admiral?
Maybe I will. Or the shirt will say you do have to be in the Navy to be an admiral. See what I'm saying? Educate the people, you know, instead of just making jokes all the time.
Hey, man, we could just put graphics on there. We could educate America.
Or both.
Educate the world, really.
Or both. So, nonetheless, it's all on jockostore.com. So, you know, if you like something, check it out. If you like something, get something. How about that, Jocko? Is that cool?
Awesome. Hey, you need some steak in your life. Maybe you need some burger, some ground beef in your life. Maybe you need just a straight bone-in ribeye in your life. Yep. Maybe you need a beef hot dog in your life. Could be any of these things. Could be required, needed. That's why we have primalbeef.com and coloradocraftbeef.com. The best quality steaks you're going to get. You're
a steak person. So there's rib steak and then there's ribeye. When I go to the store, sometimes I'll see the difference.
Okay.
What's the difference? Do you know?
I don't know what just a rib steak is.
Yeah, rib. Well, to me, it looks the same as a ribeye, maybe slightly different, but it looks the same, in my opinion. But I think there is a subtle difference. Otherwise, they wouldn't designate them like that.
We'll check with the team.
Maybe ask like Leif Babin. You know, he's a barbecue person.
We might just go to the source and just check with coloradocraftbeef.com or primalbeef.com and say, hey, what's the deal with this scenario here?
Yeah.
Rib steak. Huh. Interesting. I don't know. Also subscribe to the podcast. Also subscribe to JockoUnderground.com. Also subscribe to the YouTube channels. Jocko Podcast channel. Jocko Podcast Clips channel, because Echo's over there making clips.
We're making it happen.
Yeah, just making it happen. Look at you. Also Origin USA channel. Also Jocko Fuel channel. All good stuff. Psychological Warfare. FlipsideCanvas.com. Dakota Meyer making cool stuff to hang on your wall. Bunch of books. I've written a bunch of books about leadership. You guys know what they are. I've written a bunch of kids' books. I hope you know what they are. Way of the Warrior Kid. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, by the way. Movie coming. Don't wait till the movie. Your kid's already wasted a year of their life if you wait for the movie right now. Get them the books.
Yeah.
Besides, there's a different quality when you're reading the books. You're going to get a thing that you won't get from the movie. There's some things you're going to get from the movie you won't get from the books.
Right.
Let's get all those things. Yeah. Way of the Warrior Kid. Check it out. Also, Echelon Front. We have a leadership consultancy. We solve problems through leadership. We got the women's assembly. I will not be at that. Unless you go onto Instagram and you tag Jamie Cochran and say, we want Jocko. Even then, I don't know if I'm going. I think I'm not going.
Yeah, I could see how that could be maybe defeating the purpose a little bit if you're rolling in.
What if I just went for an hour?
Then you'd be defeating the purpose for 1 hour. Yeah.
Well, Echelon Front Women's Assembly, September 11th through the 13th down in San Antonio, Texas. I haven't been to it, but the reports that I've gotten have been awesome. So check that out. Also, we have a bunch of other events. We have the Dallas Muster, October 16th through the 18th. And then, of course, we have a leadership consultancy where we go into your company and we work with your team to get them aligned and solve all of their problems through leadership. Go to echelonfront.com for more information. Also, we have an online life training academy because there's skills that you need for life. There's skills that if you learn them, your whole life will get better. And we will teach you these skills. Go to extremeownership.com and learn the skills that you need for life. And if you want to help service members, active and retired, you want to help their families, you want to help Gold Star families, you heard us talk about Mark Lee today, and you heard me talk about Mama Lee, Mark's mom. She runs an amazing charity organization that has helped out so many of America's mighty warriors with the treatment that she gets for them. And that's one of the many things that she does. But if you want to donate or you want to get involved, go to americasmightywarriors.org. Also, heroesandhorses.org, taking our veterans up in the mountains. Micah Fink, helping them find their soul. And, of course, Jimmy May's organization, beyondthebrotherhood.org, helping SEALs get out into the civilian sector and be productive and awesome. And if you want to connect with us, Nick is on the interwebs. DLand HP or DeLand. I call it DLandHP.com. Also at Nick Kush 237. You now know the backstory.
Hell yeah.
Nick Kush. NickKush 237. For us, I'm at Jocko.com, and on social media, I'm at Jocko Willink. Echo's at Jocko. Echo is at Echo Charles. Just be careful, because there's an algorithm that'll get you. And thanks once again to Nick Kush for joining us, for talking through his experiences and lessons learned. And thank you, Nick, for looking out for our brothers on the battlefield. Won't ever forget it, bro. And thanks to all our servicemen and women around the world, with a special salute to our EOD technicians out there who step towards that horror, step towards the potential death, step towards the potential maiming that is packaged up in every little ounce of explosive. Thank you for taking that risk to protect your teammates. And also thanks to our police, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, dispatchers, correctional officers, border patrol, Secret Service, all first responders. Thank you for what you do as well. Thank you for stepping toward danger to protect us. And everyone else out there, life's going to be a challenge. But it will be that much easier to overcome those challenges. It'll be that much more fun to overcome those challenges if you connect with other people, if you build relationships, if you build a team, if you support your team, and if you, like Nick, lift up your teammates, protect them, keep them safe. And if you do that, your challenges and struggles and hardships will be overcome. And that's all we've got for tonight. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.